Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Ті, хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome back to day 692 of the news. We have some major news to go over tonight because we have been able to confirm, thanks to Ukrainian sources and video footage from the ground, that a Russian general has been confirmed killed after his A-50 was shot down over the Sea of Azov nearly 48 hours ago. We have a lot of follow-up news going off of that attack that we were covering on Sunday night, declaring that a A-50 command aircraft had been shot down, along with an IL-22M that may have potentially been shot down as well. There's a load of news, not only that, coming out tonight, saying some very interesting things have been going on inside of Russia. And not only that, we've been hearing some major news from the front lines as well, possibly showing that the Russian front lines have gone into a increased state of disarray beyond their normal amount due to the loss of the command post and the Russian general coordinating the attacks from the air. We're going to be covering all of this tonight, but before we do, I'd like to thank every one of you for helping that fundraiser on this Sunday to reach $5.3 thousand raised for Revive Soldiers of Ukraine. An absolutely incredible fundraiser, thanks to all of y'all, and going to be... And it looks like we are back on air. Sorry about that, everyone. It appears that we had a minor lag attack right there, but hopefully y'all didn't miss too much. So I'm going to be starting over just for a second to make sure that we're all up to speed. Moving on into the major news right off the shores of Berdyansk and the Sea of the Northern Azov, we were able to find a video today that showed that bodies of the A-50 crew had ended up washing up on shore. I cannot show y'all the clip on air, but in this mangle of folks who have happened to end up having a fun time on the beach or a fun time at sea for maybe a day or two, it has been stated that there is a Russian general amongst this crew that is washed up. The story about how these crew washed up from a stricken A-50 is one that we are able to deduce, but we don't have the entire story yet. Apparently, the A-50 that was shot down over the Red Sea, or the Sea of Azov right here, was shot down in a way that led to the crew possibly attempting to bail out. Most of them did not succeed, and from what we understand, if they did succeed, they may have died in the freezing waters of the Sea of Azov, and now they have washed up on shore. Russian search and rescue efforts were never recorded, so we do not know if the Russians ever sent out any helicopters, or any aircraft for that matter, to try and find the remaining stricken crew out there. This video, which once again I have to reiterate cannot be shown live on air, does show the remnants of the crew that did wash up along the shorelines just to the west of Berdyansk. If y'all would like to see that, there is a link in the description below to the video, well actually to this map. You can go to the western area of Berdyansk, click on this clip, and then you can watch the video for yourself. But it does confirm that the crew members of the A-50 did wash up on shore, confirming without a shadow of a doubt that the aircraft was in fact shot down and abandoned by the crew, leading to their ultimate deaths in the icy waters of the Sea of Azov. Speaking of which, we also got a little bit of a follow-up story on that IL-22M that we had also heard was stricken over the Sea of Azov. That IL-22M did in fact return to its airfield at Rostov-on-Don and appears to have survived the hit, but the aircraft itself may be written off as a loss. The pictures that came out of the damage to the IL-22M shows heavy shrapnel damage here to the rear tail section of the IL-22M, confirming that this aircraft may be no longer airworthy or may require a significant amount of repairs to be conducted, but we can also see that the rear part of the fuselage right near the elevators and the rudder has been seriously damaged by the shrapnel. However this missile exploded, it appears to have actually exploded towards the tail end of the aircraft, possibly suggesting, since we now know that it was in fact a Patriot battery that fired off a PAC-2 missile at this IL-22M, that the IL-22M was flying in orbit, a oval-shaped orbit, which is what most aircraft orbits look like, somewhere off the coast of Berdyansk, heading north to south, not east to west. And apparently on its southbound orbit, the Patriot missile was fired, pretty much traveling right up to the rear of the IL-22 and then exploding back there, apparently leading to a very serious but non-destructive hit. The aircraft was able to limp back after the hit and land at Rostov-on-Don, but beyond that, this aircraft will be a complete loss, confirming that not just one command aircraft, such as the invaluable A-50, was destroyed, but it also confirms that the IL-22M was critically damaged, if not knocked out of the theater entirely. Moving on from those two major bits of news, as a follow-up on that last 48 hours of harrowing reports, we also got to hear that there was, regardless whether the general be found in the pile of bodies along the shoreline, There was a Russian general on board that A-50. That was able to be confirmed, and the Russian government at the moment is reluctantly not stating whether the general has been killed or not, but they're also not affirming that he is in fact alive. They did something similar with Yevgeny Prigozhin as well when his private jet was shot down by Russian air defense forces near the area of Bakhmut, but we have not gotten any confirmation yet on this general either, and this is a very telltale sign that this general is in fact dead, and they're waiting a day or two until the relevance of the situation dies down, and then they'll come out with the official announcement to confirm that the Russian general is in fact dead. This is a general that many of y'all probably don't even know by name. The general was one of a lower level of a sort, and I'll be pulling up the Russian ranks, so that way I can try and make sure to get you all the proper name for the rank, because he was the Western equivalent of a one-star general, which in the Russian army, here in the West, it's a brigadier general is your first general on the list. In Russia, apparently it is a major general, with the lieutenant general being the second highest up. That's actually a little bit opposite of what I thought it would be, but beyond that, we did hear that apparently it was a major general on board the aircraft that was shot down and killed. However, there have only been, according to official counts before this, 8 Russian generals that had died so far in the war in Ukraine. After his death is confirmed in about 48 hours, this will be the 9th Russian general to have been killed over 2 years of fighting in Ukraine. The death of Russian generals used to be something fairly common during the summer months of 2022. In fact, it seemed like there would be a never-ending amount of Russian generals that would end up meeting their fate on the battlefields of Ukraine. But as the war has gone on, Russian generals have been moved into more rearward positions, specifically hardly even entering the theater and largely remaining within the Southwestern Military District's headquarters inside of the city of Rostov-on-Don. The death of a Russian general at all at this point in the war is something shocking and very incredible. A feat that has to be applauded on the Ukrainians' end, that they were able to take a Patriot and not only that, destroy 2 flying command posts over the Sea of Azov. Not only that, the Ukrainians have started to conduct deep strikes really far into Russian cities. Many of y'all know that Ukrainian strikes have largely consisted of attacking the border cities of Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod, Rostov-on-Don, and Krasnodar. And Rostov-on-Don and Krasnodar have been in somewhat rare instances, but still have been targets nevertheless. Over the past 48 hours, we've seen that attacks have started to occur as far north, well, as far inside of Russia as the city of Voronezh. Voronezh is a city that has been talked about a little bit on this channel, but we don't really get to talk about it much. Usually it's just far enough off the lines that its logistical operations and really its overall strategic operations kind of end up being a blur, and something we rarely ever get to talk about here on air. However, the city of Voronezh is one of the most major cities in this area of southwestern Russia, and has been a major logistics hub for logistics heading further south and into the city of Rostov-on-Don or towards Belgorod at the earlier part of the war. We've seen that apparently the Ukrainians have started to decide that this farther in strategic target has now become one to be targeted. And we can see a small video letting us hear the sound of one of those kamikaze drones of the Ukrainians flying on in and hitting their target. It's only 3 seconds long, but does confirm that attacks are now beginning to occur on the city of Voronezh. And that little flash at the end is confirming that that drone did in fact hit its target, and we did not hear, although it was a very short clip of only 3 seconds long, we did not hear any anti-aircraft fire of any sort. Now, going off of what we can extrapolate from 3 seconds of footage, which isn't really much, it appears that Russian air defenses are entirely concentrated around the border cities of Belgorod, Kursk, and Bryansk, and the air defense, once you pass that perimeter, is practically non-existent further inside of Russia until you reach a city like Moscow. Going off of this, targets like Voronezh may become suitable ones, with Ukrainian drones flying at low altitudes, making it very difficult for the air defense rings around the major border cities being able to shoot these drones down. They may be able to detect Russian logistics inside of Voronezh before they ever even reach a city like Belgorod or Rostov-on-Don, thus mitigating the amount of Ukrainian drone casualties sustained, and also hopefully increasing the amount of damage that can be caused on the Russian supply chain, which is already becoming quite fragile as it is, and has historically always been in a fragile state throughout the past century. Speaking of which, in the city of Belgrade, we also heard that there were more attacks occurring within this area as well. And we got to see that Russian air defense, the air defense perimeter I was just speaking of, has in fact been active in trying to shoot down these incoming drones. We do not know the success of the drone attack yet, how many drones were able to hit their target, or how many drones the Russians may have been able to shoot down. But a drone attack has been underway over these past few hours. We see the Russian air defense firing off missiles at the incoming Ukrainian drones, but of course we do not know how successful this is. We see the missiles exploding in air over the city. And that's the end of the clip, but giving us a very interesting look into the Russian air defense, and it appears that those may have possibly been Pantsir S-1s, which are a very common air defense system deployed by the Russian Federation at this point in the war, or they may have been S-300 or S-400 missile batteries. We're not exactly sure which ones they were, but nevertheless, it does appear that the Russian air defense perimeter around Belgrade is starting to be reinforced lightly. Earlier on in the war, we did see that they had Pantsir S-1 systems around Belgrade practically since the start of the war, but it seems as though they may be possibly increasing the number of Pantsir S-1s and hoping that out of a massive incompetent anti-air crews, they are able to somehow intercept the low amount of incoming air targets as best as possible. Moving on from that little bit of news in the city of Belgrade, we also heard in a bit of international news that President Zelenskyy was able to meet the NATO General Secretary Stoltenberg at the Davos summit today inside of Switzerland. We were able to see a quick video showing this meeting in between the NATO General Secretary and President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And we're going to be muting that probably copyrighted music. And we see them shaking hands here and posing for the cameras, and then sitting down at a table to discuss most likely the future strategic implications of the war and NATO's involvement, if possible to speak about. Beyond that, however, we have also been hearing that inside of Ukraine, things have been going fairly well, at least on the general overview of the naval side of the war inside the Black Sea, which may be a promising thing that President Zelenskyy is able to bring forward when talking to the NATO General Secretary and other Western nations to try and continue to sell this war and support for Ukraine. As satellite footage has begun to show over the past 24 hours, it appears that more naval assets have been removed from the port city of Sevastopol and moved to ports farther away from Ukrainian striking distance, such as the port of Novorossiysk or even some ports within West Abkhazan, an illegally annexed area of Georgia and considered by the Russians to be an autonomous republic and by most other countries in the international community to be an illegally controlled part of Georgia. Beyond that, however, we can see that the satellite pictures are proving that many naval vessels have left the port and very few remain. We can see that in the satellite pictures, a very small handful of ships remain. We can actually see that the Rostov-on-Don submarine is still trying to, attempted to be salvaged from its dry dock here in Sevastopol. It appears that they have not been able to salvage it, although it has been sitting there, rotting after it was destroyed in the dry dock for several months. We can also see the heavily damaged Rapucha-class landing ship just a little bit farther north that was inside the dry dock, and it appears that they were able to make it seaworthy enough that they were able to flood the dry dock and move it a little bit further up the channel, but it's still not seaworthy enough to move forward, and we can still see that its superstructure has been visibly damaged beyond repair in the satellite picture. Moving on to our next pictures, we can also see that the training ships, there is a Krivok, which is a frigate, but largely most of the training ships still remain within the port of Sevastopol, but still at a very small and decreased number. We're no longer seeing any major combat class ships of the Russian Black Sea Fleet within this port, and it appears that they are long since gone, having been moved to ports like Novorossiysk and other smaller, minor ports within West Abkhazan. Moving on from Sevastopol, it is quite clear that losses, such as the loss of the Black Sea Fleet's headquarters in Sevastopol from Storm Shadow strikes earlier on last year, as well as the loss of this Russian general from the A-50, may be producing very negative results for the Russian army in the field, and may even be producing what I would say is a time of pure chaos, at least on the army's end at this point, as they try and now figure out how to set up a new line of communication to the commanders in Rostov-on-Don and figure out how to conduct their forces on the field. I was asking y'all a question a little bit earlier, considering that many of y'all have heard about the death of this general in the A-50. What do y'all think about the losses, the loss of this Russian general? Do y'all think that that's going to have a massive impact on losses in the field, at least for a temporary time, maybe over the next few weeks? Or is it not going to have any impact whatsoever, and the Russians are able to construct a brand new chain of command and chain of communications to relay to their forces in the field, thus making the losses almost non-noticeable? Many of y'all have had some interesting inputs, and it's almost split on opinion amongst all of y'all as to what this is going to produce, at least in the short term, I would say, of the next few weeks. It was literally neck and neck. 39% of y'all said yes, 37% of y'all said no, and only 24% of y'all said maybe, and we're kind of on the fence about this. It appears that there is a perfect split down the middle as to what y'all believe the loss rates are going to look like over these next several weeks, thanks to the loss of this Russian general. And going off of that, I would have to say we actually have a little bit of an answer, at least over the very short term of the past 48 hours. I'm going to be taking y'all to the Kyiv Independence Casualty Report a little bit early in the stream, since we're talking about the losses, to show y'all what we have at the moment. And let me make sure to get the past 48 hours as well, instead of just today's casualty report, so that way we can compare them, because this Russian A-50 and the IL-22 were both shot down exactly 72 hours ago. And so we're trying to see, have the losses taken an increase over the past 48 hours? That's really the question we're trying to ask as I look on Twitter to try and find this loss report. And let's see here. We have gotten back to the 15th, so the casualty report should be here any moment now. And here we go. So, I'll be taking this over here, and we'll be looking at that in a second. But what we really need to look at is the Russian casualty report we have for today, day 692 of the war. And we're also going to be taking this one and moving it right over here. So, and also really quick, you know what? This is probably a really good move to make. I need to go get the casualty report from 72 hours ago, so that way we can compare day by day, have the losses increased since the death of this Russian general. So, on January 14th, which was this Sunday, when we covered the news last, the Russians had lost 840 Russian soldiers in 24 hours. The next day, the day after the Russian general had been killed in the A-50 and the two command posts had practically been shot out of the sky, we saw that the losses increased by another 140, and had in fact increased to about 980 per day. A slight increase, really, when you think about it in the big picture, it's a slight increase, but not necessarily showing that the loss of that Russian general had in fact led to an increase in Russian field losses. And there's many other factors that we could weigh in here as well. There could be the fact that more Russian units are being dedicated to frontline offensives. There could be a multitude of things there that could have increased these losses. But at the moment, we are just looking at the single one variable of the death of this general and the loss of the two command posts. And as we go into today, January 16th of 2024, we can see that the losses are markedly higher than even yesterday's, at now 1,110 Russian soldiers. Comparing this to 72 hours ago at 840, we can see that the losses have taken a marked increase of nearly 30%. And this may be indicating that the death of that Russian general and the loss of those two flying command posts that have been coordinating a lot of the Russian ground efforts are in fact leading to a direct implication for the ground troops that their losses are increasing due to increased confusion and also poorer planning on the commander's end. It's showing us a very interesting picture, and I think it's one that requires a lot of study, and I think this is one that also requires the removal of a lot of variables the best that we all can to see if these losses are directly being related to the loss of the flying command post. If it is proven to be true that the loss of the command post and the general is leading to this marked increase of losses, in fact, it's going upwards day by day at this point, this is a very good sign, and this may show that these kinds of losses continue on for weeks. However, we don't really know how this is going to affect Russian forces on the ground. While the increases are going to be going up drastically over these next 48 to 72 hours from what I would assume based off of the past 3 days since the loss of that general, it may not stop any Russian offensives. It may just make them a lot less potent and a lot more disorganized, which will make it easier for the Ukrainian defenders to tear apart like we have been seeing. But beyond that, however, these past 48 hours of losses, excluding the day that the Russian general died, are certainly showing good signs. Not only did 980 Russian soldiers get knocked out over the past 48 hours ago, but 20 armored personnel carriers, 31 supply trucks, 14 tanks, 24 artillery pieces, 4 drones, an MLRS, a cruise missile, and 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, along with 3 special equipment vehicles, or Bobcat skid steers, have also been destroyed over those 48 hours. Oh, really the past 48 hours. And that's something quite good. And today's losses were even more impressive in every other category. 36 armored personnel carriers were lost just today, along with an additional 33 33 supply trucks, 24 main battle tanks, 30 artillery pieces, 12 drones, 3 MLRSs, 1 cruise missile, 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems, and 9 Bobcat skid steers. The losses in every category have been increasing. It's not just something that is being affected on the ground troops level. This is something that's being affected even on the vehicular level from the armored personnel carriers and the tanks. And going off of this, I think it's very clear at this point that the Russian general's death on that command post and the loss of that command post as well is directly leading to to higher losses in every category. If it was just the infantry losses that were increasing, I would say that it's a little iffy if the Russian general's death had any kind of an impact on this. But at the same time, we're seeing the losses in every other category increase as well. And I think that this is certainly indicating that the loss of that command post, and I cannot say that enough, I think I've said that 9 times now, is in fact having a direct correlation to increase the losses for the Russian army on the ground. That is showing that the loss of the A-50 was a serious thing for the Russians, and I'm sure that they're going to be trying to find some way to get around this. But once again, it begs the question, how are they going to do it? We now know that the Russian command aircraft over the Sea of Azov are no longer safe, with the Patriot air defense system now being moved into the area with an effective striking range of 110 miles with PAC-2 battery missiles. We can see that they can practically reach halfway into the Sea of Azov. If these aircraft are to fly any further south, we would assume that they probably would not be able to make radio contact with those commanders in the field, very close to the front lines in the areas of Kherson and southern Zaporizhia, and maybe even Avdiivka as well. Going off of that, that means that flying command posts may no longer be a viable option for the Russian military to operate their ground forces out of. This then begs the question, how would they do it from there? The only option that they have left is to try and produce some kind of a command chain from Rostov-on-Don physically on the ground in static buildings to those frontline commanders. That may be a lot more difficult, and not only that, a lot more laborious for those generals to operate inside of Rostov-on-Don, decreasing the battlefield efficiency of Russia's forces. Going off of that, the casualties may actually be increased permanently from this point, considering that they are no longer able to use their most convenient option, which was the flying command posts. But moving on from all that major news and the death of that Russian general actually having a true impact on the battlefield, it's time for us to move on down into the area of our location unknowns. And we have some very interesting ones tonight. Starting off with our first one, we got to see 2 videos that came out yesterday of Russian forces in these incredibly complex tunnel systems. It seems as though the Russians are starting to learn that Ho Chi Minh may have had a point in digging those tunnels in South Vietnam. And it seems as though they're trying to do the same thing in Ukraine. I'm just going to show y'all the video. It's a little bit of a lengthy one. I think it has copyrighted music in it. But these tunnel systems are just unbelievable. I'm just going to let y'all see them for what they are. And seeing tunnel networks like these that are so, I'm not going to lie, they're actually well made. It looks like they've been working on these tunnel networks here for months. They're completely subterranean and have no access to the outside at all, rather than a few entrances here and there. Is this possibly going to decrease Russian casualties on the battlefield, because most Russian forces are now going to be within these possibly large and never-ending tunnel networks underground? And this footage is sped up, by the way. It's gone on for 40 seconds at this point, and this guy is still wandering around. We can see that there's even lighting systems inside the tunnel, and one thing that is oddly very just bizarre is that there is absolutely no moisture or water buildup within these tunnels that are clearly underground, which begs the question, do they have some kind of a pump system that has been attached to make sure to pump out any kind of water buildup inside of these tunnel networks? We can also see that they put up propaganda posters inside of the tunnels and are continuing to just show endless amounts of these things. We can see that apparently he may have made it to the entrance of the tunnel right there because it looks like some natural lights coming through, but this is not the only video we have of tunnel networks like these. We can see another tour of a very similar, if not the same tunnel network from another Russian soldier in this video.
Привет, на связи Борман, 3-й батальон. Сейчас вам покажу блиндажи. Вон комбат наш. Комбат. Ха-ха.
Now notice in this tunnel, this one does appear to have a slightly different construction. This one has a tin sheet on top of it, and that's possibly indicating there's not really a lot of topsoil on the top of this trench. Sheet steel like that, while corrugated, can support a good deal of weight, but not an incredibly high amount. This thing may only be a foot or less below the surface, meaning that this is hardly a subterranean complex, but still well enough that it may be obscured from view for Ukrainian artillery strikes to accurately hit and destroy the tunnel network. And many of y'all are actually going outside the confine of the pole and saying that these tunnels may not even be real at all, and may be in fact a propaganda attempt to make it look like the Russians are really ahead of the game. And do y'all think that? I don't have a poll up on that at the moment, but answer that for me. Do y'all think this is fake, real, or what? And many of y'all seem to believe this is entirely fake. Now, interestingly enough, though, we can see here what I assumed was true for the last tunnel network, but the last tunnel network had wood planking that lined all the way to the side of the walls. This tunnel, while having a corrugated steel roof, this one does seem to be more believable and more of a World War I style of tunnel, or connection to a trench that's a tunnel. Because you can actually see the bare soil below the wood planking on the floor. But many of y'all are not buying this. Many of y'all are saying that this is, in fact, a propaganda coup by the Russians to try and make it seem like they now have these amazing tunnel systems. Many of y'all believe that these tunnels are certainly not going to reduce Russian casualties as well, with an overwhelming half of y'all saying that they won't, a quarter of y'all saying that they probably will reduce casualties, and 30% of y'all saying that it possibly may reduce casualties. But I think we have to ask an even bigger question. Are the Russian tunnels fake? And let's ask that question. And I'm not going to give up maybe. There's no cop out on this. It's either a yes or no. You either believe they are fake or you believe they are not. And we can see them continuing to show these tunnels. And I would have to say, as a bit of an argument to say these are fake, they're never showing anything off the tunnel. It's not like it's an OPSEC issue to open up one of these doors and shows what's behind them, but they're only showing the tunnel itself. And they're still walking through these things. I mean, hell, this thing is about the size of a supermarket, to be entirely honest. Many people are saying that they are too clean, and that's an interesting point as well. And right now at the moment, the overwhelming majority of y'all think that these things are fake. 68% of y'all, out of the 700 y'all who have voted so far, say the tunnel is fake. And we see what appears to be some kind of natural light, but they're not showing what's outside, at least yet. And he never did.
Насчет окопных свечей, вот у парней вот так вот стоят, они, видите, вот так, и вот они, полочки, вот так по всей территории, по всей длине. На связи был Борман.
That's the end of the video, but it seems like a lot of y'all are not buying this. out of the 2 videos we've seen showing what appears to be 2 entirely different trench networks because they have different layouts, 68% of y'all, almost 2 out of every 3 of y'all, a little bit more than 2 out of every 3 of y'all, believe that these tunnels are outright fakes and just simply do not exist. I would have to say that if I had an option to cop out, I'd probably cop out on this and say unsure. Because, one, it's not impossible to dig trench networks like these, and getting timber for the Russians is probably one of the easiest things because the lumber industry in Russia is never-ending in size and its ability to produce basic timbers. But at the same time, having the free luxury to be able to dig such a massive trench network is a little bit tough to believe. Where in the world were they depositing all of this excess dirt that they were digging out? How in the world did they do this without the Ukrainians seeing? Obviously, with how the trench was built, they're not tunneling like a miner and then supporting the shaft after they got done digging it. They apparently dug an open hole like a trench and then started to cover it up with dirt and then corrugated tin so that way they could support the roof. So going off of all of this, it does seem to be a little bit implausible that they were able to make this thing a reality on the front lines, and it may be propaganda. But I'm going to leave it up to y'all, and it still seems like the majority of y'all say that thing is fake. Fake beyond belief. And moving on from that little bit of news and into our next bit, we also got to see a really rare sighting of a T-84U Oplot. The T-84U Oplot is quite a rare little vehicle. The Ukrainians have a limited number of these. I think it's somewhere in the 20s or 30s. We haven't seen them a lot on the front lines for that reason. The Ukrainians like to hold these things back because it's one of the most advanced Soviet-era main battle tanks that they have in their possession. But they are really cool nonetheless. It's literally just a really souped up T-80. It has the... I forgot what these things are called. I call them the eyes. But these things in practice were supposed to be able to jam and force a tow missile to veer off target and slam into the ground or something similar. That didn't really last that long. Once these things were introduced, the United States came up with an immediate counter to that, and now these things really don't affect any kind of a Western ATGM system at all. And we've seen that proven time and time again when javelins are used against T-90As. These things have posed no issue to those missiles whatsoever. But beyond that, we got to see a picture of the front of the bore painted in red. We can also see a view from the gun down towards the turret. And then this last picture we can see, well, not the last picture, but we can see an NSV machine gun for the commander's turret, the commander's cupola. We can also see the sightings of the tracks. We can see the driver right there. And in this last picture, we can get a view in between the gunner and the commander's hatch looking forwards out of the T-84. Just a really neat little picture montage there showing us a very rare tank in Ukrainian service and one that very rarely makes a sighting on the front lines. Moving on from that little bit of news, we also got to see that the Russian Volunteer Corps, a distant relative to the Freedom of Russia Legion, made a video today calling for the overthrow of the Russian government. I'll be showing you all that clip right here. Dear citizens of Russia, the Putin regime has unleashed a war in Ukraine, plunging the country into ruin and global isolation. Russian citizens are now outcasts worldwide, and mothers continually send their sons to slaughter. It's time to stop this. We are not slaves. Rise, great Russia. Overthrow the pseudo-emperor Putin. And that's the end of the clip. It was a very short message, but apparently it looks like the Russian Volunteer Corps is attempting, much like the Freedom of Russia Legion has been doing for quite a while, to rally the public in Russia to attempt an uprising. Unfortunately, messages like those appear to have fallen on deaf ears so far, because we've never really seen uprisings occur within Russia beyond incredibly small ones in areas like Ingushetia in the southern area of Russia, and some very rare uprisings near the Irkutsk Oblast near Lake Baikal. Beyond those, we haven't really seen any major uprisings that have continued to endure for quite a while. Beyond that, however, we would hope that eventually the Russian public will listen to these messages, and hopefully with a little bit of a boost from the Freedom of Russia Legion and the RDK's border raids, maybe one day we'll see that an actual continued armed uprising will occur against the Russian government. But for now, that message just stands for what it is, another rally to try and do the right thing within Russia. Moving on from that and into our next little bit of location unknown news, we also got to see a really cool little vehicle. This is a KS-19 100mm anti-aircraft gun, kind of a bigger version of the Flak 88 anti-aircraft gun that was brought to fame by the Germans in World War II. This is a bit of the Soviet variant of that, produced after World War II, sometime around 1948, I believe, and has been in service with the Russians and the Ukrainians in the current war, due to the increased demand for anti-aircraft systems, and both sides not being able to either get enough modern anti-aircraft systems, or not being able to get them in a quick enough time. We can see that they also mounted this thing onto a MAN, which is a pretty modern little truck. These things were brought around, I believe, in the 1970s and 80s inside of West Germany, and have been in use with the German forces to this day. So it's a bit of a mix of old and new. And while this thing is archaic and ancient, you have to give the Ukrainians a little bit of credit. They never lauded themselves to be one of the latest and greatest militaries in the world, and not only that, anti-aircraft systems like these may actually be very effective in some air defense situations in the modern day, especially against incoming Shahed drones, as that 100mm high explosive shell, air bursting near a drone, probably would take the thing down without a second question, without a doubt, as long as they were able to range find properly. But with that, we are now going to be moving on from that really cool little bit of news right there, well, really just a neat picture right there, and on out of the location unknowns and towards the front lines of Ukraine itself. And the news in the front lines of Ukraine has truly been massive. And I've got to say that we also have a massive return tonight. Many of y'all may know that there are legends of the Lee Spring Army that happen to frequent this channel, like BC Skyman, Mark the Kinetic Possum, Dingbad YouTube, Marcia Tucker, Alexander Nev, and loads of others who have been here for literal ages. And I've got to say that it's always incredible to see y'all in the live chat, but we've had a special return from a special legend tonight, Jesus UCSB, who has been with this channel for quite a while, and we haven't seen him for a good while on here. So welcome back, Jesus UCSB, and I hope you are here to stay. Welcome back to the live stream. But moving on from that, and on into the front lines, before we get there, so many of y'all have been saying many interesting things in the chat about what's been going on, and not only that, a lot of y'all have had some really good questions to ask as well. And to start off tonight, we have an interesting statement from Rick Clay, who threw in a 50, and I got to thank you so much for the support. And also, Walter A. Lakota said at the Enforcer, and yes, Walter, you are a legend as well. And so many of y'all are legends, like Melody Francis, Little Jam, Terry K, Dan B, AF Kaplan. So many of y'all are absolute legends, and I wish I could spend the moment to name all of y'all, but I want to make sure to keep this thing rolling. But Rick Clay said, I want to give you a heads up. All of my Ukrainian sources and Russian sources, and 2 of my U.S. sources, are confirming something big is about to happen in Ukraine with regard to a Russian offensive. Large numbers of Ka-52 alligators. And thank you for the heads up, Rick. And I got to thank you for giving me that heads up tonight of all nights, because that's actually coming around not that long after I address your super chat. We actually have a little note of those Russian helicopter buildups in between the area of Kremenna and Svatove right here. And it is starting to suggest that the Russians are trying to prepare for a new northern offensive, possibly occurring sometime in early February against Ukrainian forces in the direction of Kupiansk or in Kremenna, attempting once again, possibly, to make another thrust towards Slovyansk. It is something that we've been keeping a note of, and something that the Ukrainians have also made a particular mention of here and there. So they've started to mention that a Russian offensive in the northeastern part of the country may become a reality as time begins to pass. And I got to thank you for sharing that with me, because that once again corroborates that the information and the rumors we're hearing are starting to pass around and become a bit of a big thing. And we'll be making sure to keep an eye on it. And I got to thank you once again for the massive support and helping this channel to keep running, because folks like you make it possible. We don't run ads, we don't have sponsors. The only thing that makes this channel possible is the incredible generosity of viewers like you, Rick. And I gotta thank every single one of y'all that finds the channel worthwhile to support, because y'all are able to make it possible for me to take care of things behind the scenes, so I can focus my time in full to the news of what's going on in Ukraine and continuing to try and rally support for the folks over there. And so thank you so much once again. And into our next one, which is a 20 from Carl Elwell. And hey, thank you so much. Carl said, this may be off topic, but have you all heard of the CCP has researched another virus and given it gain of function, 100% efficacy? And yes, I have. Well, you've heard that apparently the Chinese Communist Party and their virology labs within China have supposedly been able to generate a version of the virus. Many of y'all know it plagued the world for around a year or two, but they've been able to generate a version of the virus that is able to attack the brain and kill its subjects with 100% efficacy, much like Carl was stating. Now, I have to say, I don't really get into that type of news much, but the fact that apparently that's now making public circles, and I've actually seen it on some major news organizations here and there today, may be indicating that this is a true story and something that may lead to some great concern. Viral warfare, such as that nature, has been outlawed, but considering that it kills all of its human subjects, because to give you a little bit more background to it, from what's been said, they have tested this virus or this strain of the virus against rats that have human tissues attached to them, and it's been able to kill the rats with 100% efficiency, pretty much. So going off of that, I don't think they'd ever try and use something like that because there would be no way to stop it from killing the Chinese themselves. So if that is true news, I would have to say it's probably never going to be used, but it is very concerning to think that, at least from what we're hearing, and what's spreading around out there, that may be something that the Chinese have seriously tried to work on. Once again, though, I have to say that almost every country in the world does some stuff like that. Like here in the United States, out of Atlanta, Georgia, the Center for Disease Control is continuously experimenting and working with deadly kinds of viruses and viral strains, and have been able to produce some pretty lethal ones from what we've heard, beyond the lethal kinds that are just out there in the general world. Beyond that, however, hopefully nothing goes out of control with this strain that the Chinese have been working on, because, if you go off of any prior theories out there about how the last virus was able to spread around the world, if that is anything to go off of, that one made it loose, that may be a serious issue for the world. But beyond that little bit of news, because once again, I can't really confirm whether it's true or not at the moment, because I haven't seen everyone in the world come out with a statement on it. I've just seen a few sources, and some of them a little bit larger than others. But moving on from that and into our last super chat of this segment before we get back into the news. This one is a 20. Well, actually, sorry, correction. This one is a 50. I'll be addressing two of them. But this one is a $50 super chat from Just Lucky, I guess. And I got to thank you for that, because you didn't throw in a comment, but the support is helping the channel to keep rolling. Your support is helping me to be able to focus on things behind the scenes, so that way I can put my time into what we're doing on air completely. I got to thank folks like you for helping me to get rid of my off-channel woes and focus on this entirely, but support like that is very important to the longevity and survival of this channel. And I got to thank you so much for appreciating the channel enough that you found it worthwhile to support in the first place. And moving on from that and into our last question of the segment, this one is a 20 from Bernard Butler. And Bernard Butler's question to the Enforcer: can you ID this place in a vast region of deserts in China? And let's see. And then he threw in some coordinates. And I'll see if I can copy these coordinates here real quick. So let me see if I can. And let's see here. Let me copy that and go pull up a Google Maps off screen and go plug this in real quick, because maybe we got something here. Let's see what we got. Oh, let's see here. Oh, man. Let's see if it'll pull this up. Here we go. And let me go to layers. And let me make sure this is the right place. So this is in the Xinjiang province of eastern China, western China specifically. But looking at this and zooming in, see some kind of a odd geometry in the desert. It's a grid layout. We can see a dirt road going to it, and there are these little gray concrete blocks all over the place on this thing. Unfortunately, I probably wouldn't be able to get you a lot of information about this, because we do know what American missile silo sites look like, and having them in such a strict concentration of this, it appears that they are less than 100 feet apart from each other, would be less than ideal for missile silos. Putting this many of them in a single area makes it a prime target to strike and destroy from for rival nations like the United States. So I'm guessing that it's probably not a missile silo. In fact, considering that these little squares are probably less than 10 feet wide, I'd actually have absolutely no idea as to what this thing is. But it has been completely blurred out. We can also see some additional objects in the middle of the grid, and it appears that they're casting shadows and apparently have some height to them. But beyond that, we're not really getting much more from this area than what we can see. The squares are not elevated at all. They do not cast a single shadow over the area, and that means that they are recessed into the ground. But beyond that, I could not tell you. Very odd, though. And also, let's see, Kolchak said it's probably satellite telemetry testing, and I'd agree, but there is clearly some kind of a road that has been constructed by the Chinese through the desert to the site down here. And you can see that the site does terminate here, and there is also a berm of sand where it appears that they may have leveled this area to try and create whatever this is. But many people are saying that it's most likely a satellite grid to focus the lens, but it is really odd to see that there are these sand berms around this perfectly square area that shows that it may have in fact been leveled by machinery on the ground. So unfortunately, I don't have any idea what this thing is. I would rule out a missile silo, because considering that this is a truck width out here on this road, it looks to be maybe a one-way road, this probably would not be a missile silo, just too small. I think we can find some missile silos here in America and compare the size, because we know that the space in between the squares was about 50 feet apart, and there are some missile silos in Nebraska near, I think it's Broken Bow, if I'm correct. And let's see here. Not seeing any at the moment. Wait a minute, there's some outside of Cheyenne, Wyoming. I know that for sure, so let me go out here. And let's look around out here. So there's Warren Air Force Base. And then there's a missile silo a little bit further up the road. That's not it. Let's see here. I think that's it. Nope. There is one. I mean, it's literally like right off the road. May as well just be on it. I think it's somewhere a little bit further. Here's the Cheyenne landfill. And we can keep on going around town, back around. I'd be dipped. I can't find it. Where the hell is it? Is that it? No, that's not it either. That's another range. Where the hell is this missile silo? Because I swear I saw one up here before. But let's see here. Maybe I can just pull it up. U.S. missile silo map. Let's go to the map. Let's try and find ourselves a little missile silo here. And we have some locations here. It appears that there is a large field of them north of Warren Air Force Base, on the other side of Cheyenne, so apparently we're going the wrong way. Let's see what we got out here. Huh. Well, not really seeing many of them. These appear to be houses, almost look like some kind of a massive missile silo location. Oh, here we go. No, that's an oil well. I was about to be like, oh, here we go. No, that's an oil well, so that's not it either. I'd be dipped. It's a lot harder to find these things than you'd think. But apparently there's some all over the place. There's some in Montana, and there's a lot of them near this area, but I'm just not finding any of them. And I don't know why. I mean, you'd think it'd be easy to find these things, but I'm having a hard time finding one. So let's look around a little bit more. Sadly, I just can't find the missile sites right now to even attempt to compare. Maybe if I went out here. Maybe that's... Nope. Nope, that's a little bit too big. That's not a missile silo either. I'm telling you what, I can't find one. So sadly, I'm going to have to give up on that little chase for a missile silo. Let's see. Wait, hang on. Maybe someone... Dude, it's by I-80 East. Thank you. Thank you for that. It's by I-80 East. So let's go down I-80 East. Let's see what we got here. Maybe we got a missile silo. Because they got to be out here. Because the map's showing that they're all around Cheyenne to really a little bit to the west, a lot to the north, and a lot to the east. So we're looking around I-80 East here, and I'm still not seeing a missile site yet. But, you know, if y'all want to, y'all can watch me look for a missile silo here. It's not out of the question. We will find it eventually. It's just a matter of time. But I'm having a hard time seeing these things. We're almost at Pine Bluffs now. And we are out of Pine Bluffs. Wait a minute, there it is. Here's a missile silo. So this is the size of what I would say is a standard missile silo here in the United States. And we can see that there is one missile silo here, most likely for some kind of a Trident missile, although there's multiple different missiles in the U.S. inventory. And the space that the missile silo is confined to is roughly about 200 feet across, which means that those little cubes, spaced about 50 feet apart from each other, probably would not be big enough for a missile silo, because that entire thing was only about 400 feet wide and about 400 feet tall, and the spacing in between the cubes was only about 50 feet. A silo to hold an intercontinental ballistic missile appears to be approximately 20 feet wide at its entrance, and those little blocks were about 10 feet wide, so probably too small of a diameter for intercontinental ballistic missiles. But with that, I hope that does address that well. Very interesting question, by the way. And I got to thank you for throwing in a really good one, because those are the kind of questions that don't really pertain to the war itself, but still interesting ones to talk about, Bernard. And I got to thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping it to be possible for us to keep running, so that way we can look at interesting things like that, and not only that, help to keep the channel running. And so thank you so much once again. And with that, we are now going to be moving on over here again and into... Well, actually, we already had the map right there, and we're now going to be moving out of the questions segment and back into our Frontline news. But of course, if you did throw in a super chat, just want y'all to know, if you did throw one in, I will make sure to address it before the stream goes off air. We always make sure to address every single live chat, and thank you all for the support, because each one of y'all, whether your support be big or small, is helping this channel to keep running, and the only thing that makes it possible. And so, thank you all once again, and I'll make sure to get to y'all's once we wrap up this news segment, which will be a little bit longer, but hopefully y'all will enjoy it. But moving on into our northeastern area near Kupiansk, we have seen that Russian forces have been getting hit pretty accurately by the 40th Artillery Brigade. This was near the area of Sinkivka, a Russian location where they attempt to try and conduct a large amount of offensives, although they never really succeed. We can see that this Russian dugout here is getting smacked by the 40th Brigade's artillery, and we can see another Borokhi Squad Bike being hit in the tree line. Unfortunately, I don't know what that is exactly off the top of my head. We can see them cluster bombing another location. It appears to be some kind of a Russian trench work. And we can now see Russian vehicles roasting outside the trench work, apparently being hit and destroyed by the artillery. And we see the cluster bombs falling down on top of the locations. We can also see them showing some roboti, which is a soldier, and it appears that they are taking a lot of naps. And we always love to see them sleeping, you know, because the more the Russians are sleeping, the less the Ukrainians are having to fight. So great to see, and hopefully they'll be able to keep up those kinds of losses on the Russians and ensure that the frontline situation is even a little bit more comfortable for those on the battlefield. But moving on from that little bit of news and on into our next bit near the area of Avdiivka, we can also see that a WASP anti-air system had been destroyed by the Ukrainians with a HIMARS today in the very northern area of Ukraine. It's quite rare to see and let me make sure. Yeah, that's not a Marine Brigade. Interesting emblem, however. And we can see it's an OSA anti-air system, something of an older one. It's vintage, from about the mid-70s, so it's about 50 years old at this point. And we can see out of the fog, the HIMARS slammed right on top of it and blew the thing to bits. And that's the end of the clip right there, but very nice to see that they were able to target and strike an OSA anti-air system. They called it a WASP in the caption, but that is not a WASP. We can see here very clearly that the brigade who targeted it called it an OSA, and we can also see that very distinct anti-aircraft turret that is on top of an OSA system. In fact, the long chassis of the actual mobile part of the system also indicates it is in fact an OSA. It is six-wheeled, and that is a very indicative sign of OSA anti-air systems. So this one is not a brand new WASP anti-air system. This is actually a fairly old OSA system. Still, the destruction of that system is probably leading to a loss of anti-air defenses in the area, and hopefully helping the Ukrainians to continue to attack Russian forces with greater ease and efficiency. Moving on from that and a little bit further down towards Krasnoyarsk, we got a video today from the Russian Ministry of Defense showing an increased presence of Russian helicopters in the area, and some that we have not seen since the beginning of the war and the heavy loss of Russian helicopters near the city of Kherson. Russian helicopters have been lost in incredibly high numbers. From what we estimate, due to their pre-war numbers, nearly 35% of the Russian helicopter fleet has been shot down over the past 2 years in the battles that have been fought over Ukraine. Since about the beginning of this last year of 2023, Russian forces have started to use their helicopters far less, and whenever they are used, they've been used in indirect rocket rolls, much like Ukrainian helicopters have been used, due to the danger of using them in their direct fire forms with guided missiles. That has usually ended up being a bad recipe for Russian helicopters and has ended up leading to their destruction. However, we're starting to notice that very rare helicopters like the Ka-52 are starting to show up in very large numbers near the area of the Svitove-Kremenna front line, and possibly suggesting that the Russians are beginning to build up these helicopters in an attempt to conduct an offensive in this area. I'll be showing y'all the clip, and take it for what it is. We see here a Ka-52 taking off with a couple of possibly Vickers missiles attached. We can see a Fab 250 and 2 S8 rocket pods attached to the Ka-52's wings. Not wings, they're support pylons. We can also see an Mi-17. We see the Ka-52 and Mi-17 flying out together. We now see footage from inside the Mi-17 as it flies over a line of dragon's teeth. See here, apparently the Russian helicopter forces have run out of funding because the guy doesn't have a machine gun. He just has a AK-74M, and that's, I guess, his machine gun. So good on him. We now see a close-up of the Ka-52. This one is actually the same one. I had to double-check, because this one has the 4 Vickers missiles attached to it. But oddly enough, this one is not sporting the normal gray camo pattern we've seen. This one's sporting the rarer two-tone camo pattern that we've seen. And sadly, we don't know what helicopter wings this one would be attached to have that kind of camo. Most Ka-52s come in kind of a darker gray camo scheme. See, the Ka-52 has gone ahead of the Mi-17, and even carrying the Vickers and the Fab 250 on the other support pylon, the thing ends up firing an indirect rocket roll. What a shock. The Mi-17 is following up, probably do the same thing. See it tilting up, firing off its rockets, and popping flares and getting out of there. We now see the Ka-52 flying over a... I would like to say that thing's abandoned, because it's in such bad shape. It may be abandoned, but I'm sure the Russians wouldn't show an abandoned and destroyed msot on film. So I'm sure they would want you to think the thing's living. We're flying past Schrodinger's msot S at this point. It's either alive or dead. That's up to y'all. What is it? Is it alive or is it dead? I also see some camera footage here in the cockpit of the Ka-52. Ugh. That's it, you know. We now see the Ka-52 landing at the helipad. And that's the end of the clip. Beyond that, we're starting to note that the Russians are clearly indicating that there is an increased presence of helicopter forces within the Kremenna-Svitove area. And this is leading heavily into what was said earlier about a possible Russian offensive that is going to be happening in this area. From what we can tell, Ukrainian intelligence reports, as well as what we're starting to clearly see, is indicating that there may be something moving along in this area. And I got to thank Rick Clay for bringing this up earlier, because he hit it dead on the nail. From what a lot of the military analysts are seeing, we're seeing the rumor and the indication that there may be another offensive heading off in this direction from the Russians. It may be launched from the Kuzymivka area towards Kupiansk, or it may be launched from the Kremenna Forest, or just outside the Kremenna Forest, attempting to capture Torskay and Liman. Beyond that, however, we're starting to see that there is a lot of activity, a lot more activity than normal on that part of the front. And meanwhile, in the Kremenna Forest, we have seen that the Ukrainians and the Russians have continued on with their fairly intense fighting inside of the Kremenna Forest. We got to see a shooting battle here from the Ukrainian side in the Luhansk region. Also note at the very beginning of the video that UAR-15s, which is a license-built variant of the AR-15 platform, are starting to become a lot more common in Ukrainian frontline service, and showing that Ukrainian industrial abilities are apparently a little bit stronger than we thought it would be, at least within the small arms category. We can see the soldiers here moving on along, and we can see that this entire group is equipped with AT weapons. You see them looking off into the distance. Sadly, I would play the audio, but it's got copyrighted music in it. We can see the first Ukrainian infantryman to the left has moved up, and it appears that he's preparing to fire his AT weapon. He fired it, apparently point-blank range, onto a Russian position right in front of him. We see him firing his AT weapon, and I think the third guy just fired his right there. We now see them advancing and starting to fire onto what may be a trench network right in front of them. And Lauren, the way you ask a question is to @me, @the Enforcer. And you can, and once you do that, like you did right there, I'll be able to answer your question, hopefully. And sorry about that. I haven't really been talking a lot to y'all in the live chat at the moment, because I'm trying to make sure that we get the news out as accurately as possible. But still, I will make sure to try and answer y'all's questions as they come in. We see the Ukrainians now firing down the trench lines. And we see them continuing to fire into the trench. And 420, all is well. Just trying to make sure to balance everything at the same time. It is a little bit more difficult to do everything alone, but at the same time, it's what has to be done at this point. But also, TTCM ZX, why is the sky blue? That is a very in-depth answer, actually, when you get into like the technical answer. But the sky is blue because it reflects off the seas and oceans and everything, and that's what we're going to go with. But Steelworks Film said, "Where's Enforcer Man?" This is something that has actually happened, I think, on Friday of last week. Matthew has decided that it's going to be a little too stressful to do law school and this at the same time. It was very stressful on both of us last semester. It's been incredibly stressful on us both starting this semester, and he's decided that he's got to focus entirely on law school this semester, so that way he can make sure to make it on through and graduate. At the same time, I've kind of had to make the choice of whether I'm going to do this alone or whether I'm going to focus on law school entirely, and I chose to run it alone and just keep the news running. I've been doing this for nearly 2 years at this point, and I could never imagine quitting anytime soon, even if it got incredibly stressful. I'm still going to keep up the same 6-day schedule that I have been for years on end at this point. But with that, I hope everyone respects his decision, and I got to give a huge credit to Matthew, who was an amazing co-host. But, you know, when he realizes that something's very important to do for himself, and he's making sure to take care of his long-term life goals, I've got to applaud him on that. That's probably a very good decision on his end. But nevertheless, I got to make sure to keep this thing rolling. We got news to run, and the news must flow. The spice must flow, and therefore I'm still here on air and making sure to cover this although solo. We see the Ukrainians lobbing some nades at the Russians. And Hoagie, I was the one who did the impressions. Oh, man, I'm telling you. But I haven't really had a lot of a chance to do impressions lately while we watch this firefight go on down. I haven't really had a lot of an ability to do them lately because there's just not a lot of chances where I can. But I hope that answers that well because I was the one who did most of them. And also, Margaret Hemsley said, "You were the GOAT. Matthew's the best bro." He's a great brother, an amazing one. And I got to thank you for saying I'm the GOAT. That's an incredibly kind compliment of you. And I'm glad to know a lot of people also respect my decision to do this thing alone if I have to, because it's important to me to continue covering news like this. And, you know, it's what I've done for 2 years. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we're now going to be moving on from that battlefield footage and into our next bit, where we got to see the Russians have been destroyed near Kreminna. Well, you see our little lovely Russians, and now we can see that they become a lighthouse, apparently guiding other Russians away from the area and showing them that it's filled with great danger. Oh, no. Dante said, "Have you considered doing the entire stream as Rodney Dangerfield?" I have in the past, and I'm scared I'd run people away. And let's see. Danny Avalon said, "How many NATO battalions do you think are in the Baltics or in the Balkans?" Well, we know about brigades. I think there's at least 5 or 6 NATO brigades in the Baltics right now. And that's the end of that clip right there, but wonderful to see that Russian forces got decimated and destroyed. Moving on from that, now the Kreminna battlefield area, it's time for us to go on down into the direction of Bakhmut. And we've seen some very interesting things going on down here in the Bakhmut direction. I'll be showing y'all a little bit of the battlefield breakdown over the past 48 hours to make sure that we all have a very good grasp and understanding of what's been going on here and what the Russians and their glorious, impressive, second best military in the world has been able to achieve against a country that was never known for having military prowess. It appears that over the past 48 hours, they've not moved forward a single inch and have taken hundreds of losses, both wounded and killed, to achieve absolutely nothing. But hey, at least they get to brag that they suck. I guess that's one point that they can get out, because I gotta tell you something. There's 2 things that suck the hardest in this world. One is the Russian army, and the other one is some hot dog seller whose parents abandoned him in Minnesota. And moving on from that, we also got to see a Russian assault ongoing in the northwestern area. This apparently was conducted by the Russian 98th Airborne Division, and it appears that they may have not been able to have that much success, but I'll make sure to show you all this clip right here. It gives us a little bit of a look at what the Russian side of fighting looks like around the Bakhmut area. Oh, and also I forgot, there are actually 3 things that suck the hardest in this world. The Russian army, the hot dog salesman in Minnesota, and also Chris's mom. I forgot Chris's mom, that's the 3rd one. Here, a little bit of firefight going on here. We can see our Russians here are not really firing back a lot, but apparently the Ukrainians are firing a little bit at them. See this Russian laying low. And you see this guy finally popping off a couple of the shots. And no, it's not Chris from Mr. Beast. No. It's some guy who came in here. He was a big hater of the channel. And his name was Chris. It's not Chris Cooper, by the way. Chris Cooper is a legend of the channel. But there was another Chris that came in. He said some smack to us, so he started making jokes about his mom, and it's just stuck around ever since. So when we say Chris's mom, it's about the hater's mom, not anyone else's, any other Chris's mom. Every other Chris's mom is an amazing mom. We hear some artillery flying overhead. We don't know whose it was and where it went. and they threw up an intro card, but the video is not even over. And they're back. Look at that. What the hell? They threw an outro card up, and the video wasn't even over. They just threw it up in the middle of everything. So we now see them moving through the forest. I don't think they're moving forwards. It looks like they may actually be falling back a little bit.
Не стреляй. Это железка! Да.
You see the battlefield is kind of going silent with the small pops of gunfire way off in the distance. And that's the end of that clip. But still, really interesting to see the Russian perspective of a firefight in the northern battlefield of Bakhmut as they make literally no ground whatsoever and still end up losing hundreds of guys. They didn't just lose hundreds of guys, they lost a T-90M as well. And we have to assume that these things aren't as rare as we originally thought. Apparently they're able to upgrade T-90As into T-90Ms because we're starting to see a lot more of them than they were ever supposed to have based off of the pre-war numbers, but we're still seeing what is supposedly the best main battle tank of the Russian army get destroyed over and over and over again. This was on the northern area of Bakhmut. Here's the clip. There's our T-90M. We can see the outline of the turret. And we can see that an FPV drone hit the thing and blew the turret sky high. Rate the turret toss. Is it good? Is it bad? What is it? You know what? Let me watch that turret toss again. I give that thing a 9 out of 10. I'm going to put that in the chat. 9 out of 10 on that turret toss. And also, Nomos said, dude, hating on Minnesota. LOL. Yeah, I'm not really hating on Minnesota. Minnesota's not a bad place, but there is one guy there who is a literal spawn of Satan, and I'm not going to let him ever get away with that. The guy's a sick bastard, you know, he just will never leave us alone. So the guy is just the sickest and sucks the most. And I don't mean, you know, suck like a vacuum. I'm telling you, he could suck a golf ball through a garden hose. But moving on from that amazing turret toss and the loss of that T-90M, it's time for us to move on a little bit further down the lines and into the area of Klishkivka, where we got to see that apparently the Ukrainians are starting to whip out the Gush Gun APCs. It's a MTLB with a Gush Gun mounted on top. Pretty cool. But when you see them driving through that horrendous mud in the area of Bakhmut, but it's neat to see the Gush Gun MTLBs because, you know, an MTLB is not that neat. But having a Gush Gun on top, now that's some suppressing firepower right there if you use that against some infantry forces. But still, really nice. And I love to see the Ukrainians whipping out a rare oddity here and there like that thing. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see that the 93rd was able to destroy a Russian Kornet ATGM in the southern part of the battlefield today near Klishkivka. And also, I've heard many great things about Minnesota. Maybe one day I'll go up there. Of course, have to take a little trip by St. Paul first. But anyways, we can see the 93rd hitting the Russian positions and their ATGMs. And that's the end of that clip. But wonderful to see that they were able to knock out that Kornet ATGM and make sure that the Russian anti-tank forces in the area are a little depleted. This means that the Ukrainians can roll their tanks up in that area, hopefully without the fear of being hit or possibly destroyed, and provide more support for the Ukrainian infantry that are still fighting on that area of the line. Moving on to our last clip in the area of southern Bakhmut, we also got to see that a Ukrainian T-64 BM Bulat, speaking of getting hit by AT weapons, got hit, survived the hit, and continued to keep on going.
Не знаю.
See our driver getting down into the T-64, and they're on their way. Oh, we can hear the T-64 firing, I believe. Actually, no, that was the hit. That was the T-64 getting hit. It looks like the ERA tiles did their job. They exploded when the FPV hit it. The tank's still operational.
Командирскую башенку разъебало полностью, то есть тримплекс.
And you see that it looks like it knocked out the commander's optic. You see them rolling through a town, might be in Chasivyar. You see an explosion further down the road. You can see the gunner and the commander closing their hatches or buttoning up. See another explosion right in front of the Balat, but the Balat does not care. It continues to press forward. We now see the Balat has entered what appears to be its firing position and is now firing on the Russian forces near the other ridge, near Klishkivka. Tanks continuing to fire into the tree line. I see the tank rolling. Oh, did y'all see that? It's a rare sighting of an STRF 9040 on those part of the line. What a sight! Those are actually really rare in the Bakhmut battlefield. Usually we only see those things way up in the northeast, near Kupiansk, but we had to see one in Bakhmut. And that's pretty unique. That little thing's scooting. Oh, I love those things, y'all. The 40mm Bofors isn't like the heaviest hitting thing in the world, and this version doesn't have an ATGM attached to it either. So punch-in power-wise, this thing is only fighting other APCs, and, well, I don't know. I mean, that Bradley did knock out a T-90M, so this thing could probably knock out a main battle tank as well at this point. But I gotta tell y'all, the lines on this STRF 9040, they're just beautiful. I love these little things. I think they're great APCs. But just had to point that out. Very rare to see these things this south on the line. So the tank's scooting on out, driving through mud. Oh, hey, look at this. This is actually really cool. You can see how hot the barrel is right here, because the barrel, you see, water got all over the barrel when it went through that mud puddle, and you can see that the barrel is so hot from firing that it immediately started to turn the water into steam, and it started to steam off the barrel. Check that out. That is really cool. Something you never think about. That's the end of that clip, but oh man, that was a neat little ending right there, and great to see that Balat was able to take a hit and even survive it and keep trucking in that area. It's time for us to move on out of Bakhmut and a little bit further on down and into Avdiivka, because there's been a lot going on in Avdiivka as well over the past 48 hours, and from what we can see, and I'll be putting y'all over the past 48 hours right here, and the 14th, we can see nothing has changed. Both in Marinka and in Avdiivka, there's been absolutely no frontline changes at all. And while that seems a little mundane, that there's not a lot of action happening and the Ukrainians aren't moving forward, and neither are the Russians, it's very important to note that the Ukrainians are fighting defensive battles along almost the entirety of the front lines as we speak. And so seeing a front line that does not move is in fact a winning battle for Ukraine. If any front line is moving at this point, it's going to be the Russians moving eastward, and that means that the Ukrainians are losing the battle. The fact that the front lines are not moving anywhere are showing that the Ukrainians are currently winning all battles going on every part of the front. Moving on down into Avdiivka, and towards the area of its northern side, near Krasnoyarivka and Stepove, we got to see the 109th Territorial Defense Brigade conducting an attack with support from the 47th Mechanized M2 Bradleys. We can see a knocked out BMP a little further ways away. It looks like it's a 30mm 2A42 gun and a BMP-1 turret. Never seen anything like that before, but we can now see the M2 rolling up with its brought armor edition. We see an explosion happening near those knocked out BMPs. See the Bradley actually ripping apart that BMP as we speak. The 25mm piercing straight through the side armor and probably out the other side as well if they're using armor-piercing fin stabilized discarding sabos. And we can see that apparently they just hit the ammunition stowage right there because a thick veil of smoke started to come out of the side. We can now see the 109th TDF's perspective as they now start a firefight with the Russians near the railroad berm. We can see the Bradley providing fire support for him. And we can see this Ukrainian rifleman here continuing to lay down the consistent fire with his AK. It appears that everyone in the 109th Territorial Defense Forces is using the older AK-74 platform, a very reliable one, very durable, but at the same time leaving a little bit to be desired most of the time in the customizability department. We actually have an AK-74 and have made a video on it here on this channel. Many of y'all saw that. And I gotta say, I'm a pretty big believer that AKs are not that bad anymore. I've actually been converted into a little bit of a believer. The AK-74 has practically no recoil, is very manageable, and while we didn't show it on video, because I actually didn't have a target up during that video, they're actually quite accurate out to a pretty good distance. I would say approximately about 400 to 500 yards, which is about the maximum distance you would ever see an infantry unit engage in a firefight. Beyond that, not bad to see, and great to know that the 109th and the 47th are working together to continue to hold a defensive line in that area of the battlefield. Moving on in towards the southwestern side of Avdiivka, we also saw that another Russian attack in this direction failed, and pretty badly. We can see that this was filmed by the 110th Brigade as they were the ones conducting the defense on this side of the battlefield. And we can see their Russian attack column moving in way off in the distance. The drone is zoomed in as far as it can, and we can just see a little bit of the silhouettes of the tanks leading this APC column onto their already fate-be-known kind of an assault. And we can see here the Russian attack column finally coming within distance of the Ukrainian defense. And we now see sporadic artillery shells landing way off around the convoy. We can see what appears to be our first damage to the column as the third to last BMP has been hit and is now smoking. We can see that the column is still being attacked. And we can see the first main battle tanks firing. Both of them have cope cages equipped. We can see the tanks are now firing on their first trench that they found of the Ukrainians. And the video clip ends there. We didn't really get to see a lot of how that attack ended, whether it be successful or not, but we did get to see that apparently the Russians are still conducting armored attacks on the southwestern side of Avdiivka. Moving on towards Opitny, we got to see a little bit later on that apparently the 110th Brigade was dropping bomblets in another area of the front line just a little bit further south of Avdiivka. We're believing that this is somewhere in between Marinka and Avdiivka, but I put the marker near Opitny. You see the 110th putting up their intro card as they now drop bomblets onto believed Russian positions. It's a very odd building, and it's actually so distinct, we could probably geolocate this exactly if we wanted to. That's the end of the clip right there, but showing us a little bit of the 110's, drone bombing campaigns on the Russian forces hiding within that odd-looking building. But moving on from that and out of the Avdiivka battlefield, because while Avdiivka is the largest battle that's still ongoing within Ukraine, the video footage that is coming out of it is just becoming increasingly less and less. We're starting to note that Russian forces are apparently becoming increasingly stagnant, or at least increasingly repetitive in their attacks, and therefore we're getting a lot less footage out of this battle, although it still is the largest one by numbers. Moving on from that and into the area of Makivka, we also got to hear that the story about in occupied territory not far away from Avdiivka is not all that great. The Russians have been in control of the DPR and, the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic, two illegitimate nations that were created as puppet states by the Russian Federation and existed from the times of 2014 till the middle part of 2022, when they were annexed by the Russian Federation officially. They have been under direct Russian control for that entire time and have been supported by the Russians. It appears that they have been going through some very bad straits infrastructure-wise, as people are now being noted to be without heating here as well, not just inside of mainland Russia, but also within the occupied territories, and people are beginning to legitimately freeze to death, and they're begging the Russian government for some kind of support or help. We're going to be playing the clip right here, but this is the kind of future that would exist for all Ukrainians if the Russians did ever end up winning the war. Someday we will live more or less normally. 15 degrees of heat in the apartments and the same figure only in the minus. The unequal temperature ratio is only in the tens. They rest of the peace of the authorities. People have no patience. How many people will lie? Not a single phone. There's no answer. You come to administration, they are sitting, falling apart. They do not want to listen. Unlike our film crew, people in the wagon tell how since October to this day, the batteries have been no more than a baton. No heat in the apartments, immediately 6 floors. My wife is sick. She's a child of the war. I myself already 9 to 10 years old, and I walk like this. It was not easy to find the responsible. At first, it turned out that these houses on Leninsky Avenue served the heating network of a completely different district, Kurovsky. We were connected for 3.9 lands, and you were not ours. I say, how are we not ours? We are paying you. However, the money, as they say, is for the wind, but no one is going to do the recalculation for the cold air. In the apartments, they say, it's a little warm. Further, the address is to the heating network. The answer is this. Both boilers are broken. They will be repaired only when the heating session ends. In fact, the peaceful boiler serves 5 heating points at once. Peaceful Sunny the first, the second, the Star, and the Old. And as the people think unfairly, those who are closer to them receive heat. The temperature of the supply is 29, 20, 45, and 27. There's no pressure in the system. I called the dispatcher today. I say, when will it all end? Disgrace. When will there be heating? She says, what is it? Tell me, according to the norm, what should be the temperature of the supply? She says to me, this is a commercial secret. To find out allegedly secret information about the appearance of heat, Svetlana also tore off her phone. After all, she got sick from constant cooling but does not give up. What is the reason for the cold battery today? I do not know. No. We did not open anything. Everything works. Only the boilers work alone. It is impossible to make a load on it because it flows all the time. If a large load is made, it becomes a complete star, peaceful, sunny area. And then the responsibility is put on people themselves. But if you do not do anything, the situation will remain the same. We go to the same boiler room of the peaceful misconduit. Will you refuse to say? Of course. But in Zeka they react, although with delay. A month later, after application, the dispatcher finally came. He summarized, there is no air in the system. We examined, well, there is heat in the houses, but not in the full volume. Because the heat sits on the boiler, minus on minus gives a plus. But cold on the street, cold in the apartments, and will there be a stud? And the clip ends there, and while the translation is absolute dog water, we're getting the idea here that apparently the infrastructure is collapsing within the Donetsk area, or Donetsk city in Makivka, and people are going without heating for extremely long durations of time. And what's the most bizarre thing is that they are getting some kind of heating and cooling, but it's cooling in the middle of winter. And I don't think they need cooling in the middle of winter. But still, looks like things are going very poorly within the occupied areas of Ukraine, much like can be expected. But moving on from that little bit of news, and on into our next bit of news, we also got to hear that the Russian FPV drones, well, actually, the Russians got hit by an FPV drone, and these Russians disappeared without a trace. Here's the clip. We can see our little Russians trudging through the snow. And they're all grouped up quite nicely. A perfect target. And it looks like they got hit, and all of them disappeared. That is a magic trick if I've ever seen one. Can we do it again? And we see the drone kind of trying to process the information as well as to where did they go? What happened to them? Why are they no longer here? And those are the exact same questions I had about all kinds of things. But beyond that, great to see they were able to knock out 3 Russian soldiers with 1 FPV drone. It's almost like that story of, 3 so-and-sos walking to a bar or something. It's a lot like that. But beyond that little joke, and moving on past the Russian military, which is also another amazing joke that you can tell friends and family at your next gathering, it's time for us to move on down towards Novomikhailivka, where we got to see the Russian airborne in this area also got blasted. Actually, the Ukrainian airborne blasted the Russian forces. But you see our little Russians walking past. Okay, well, we could see them walking past a BMP. It just blew up and heavy metal started to play, and the Russians went and hid in the thickets near the street. It looks as though that BMP is starting to simmer up, and the Russians are running away, at least the ones that could. The other ones are just kind of lying around and sleeping a little bit now. And we can see here the Russians, oh goodness, they are having a toasty time. A very common story for many Russians, having toasty times like this. And then the video kind of cuts out, but we see a little bit of a fireworks show, and then finally the video clip ends with the tanks, well, the BMP still burning. But a very successful hit by the 77th Separate Air Mobile Brigade, who continues to destroy the enemy. This time, the target is an enemy BMP that got lost. And lost it became. And lost it will forever stay. But moving on down through the Volodar area and on towards Huilopol and Robotne, we also get to see that in the direction of Zaharne, a Russian soldier decided to do the smart thing and surrender to the drone flying overhead. This was published by United 24 today. Here's the clip. That intro was pretty cool, but I'm sure it's copyrighted. But we can see our Russian soldier here crawling out from the bottom of the tank and realizing that there's not really a lot of hope for him as he crawls through the sludge. We see the Russian throwing up his hands and yelling that he surrenders to the drone. And we can see that apparently in between him begging to surrender and now, the Ukrainians apparently struck the tank trying to destroy it. And it seems as though they're now showing another clip of another Russian who's decided to surrender quite recently. We can see that this guy actually got led to the Ukrainian infantry. And then the caption says, the Ukrainian military talks differently to soldiers who decide not to surrender, and I'm pretty sure they do. We see them showing a huddled group of Russians that has surrendered, quite a large number of them, maybe an entire squad. And that's the end of that clip, but showing us a little bit of Russian soldiers surrendering throughout most of the front lines, specifically in the southern area. It's now time for us to move on down to the area that is kind of the most interesting and unique as far as its environment, its climate, as well as how the battlefield has unfolded looks like. And that area is the Dnipro River, the left bank of the Dnipro. Many things have been going on here, and the Ukrainians continue to keep their hold of Krenki as best as they did days ago, the last time we covered the news. Moving on into Nova we got to see that some Ukrainian artillery was wildly successful today in the counter batteries. It was able to find 2 Tornado MLRSs, a fairly sizable one, similar to that of an Uragan, and not only that, they were able to destroy them. And we got to see that on film right here. We can actually see that the caption calls them Uragans, which I believe would be a correct assumption. And we can see the artillery shell flying on the first one, hitting it and destroying it. We see the next round coming in and hitting it and destroying it as well. And look at that. Impressive stuff, and wonderful to know that the Ukrainians, apparently maybe with an Excalibur it seems, were able to knock out those 2 Uragans. Moving on from that, we also heard that apparently there's some drama unfolding in the area of the Dnipro River, in the left bank, because as y'all know, it's gotten cold, and some areas like the Konka River have ended up freezing. The Dnipro River itself does not freeze. It never really gets cold enough for that river to actually freeze on over, but the smaller little rivers here in the Dnipro marshes do freeze over because the currents are so slow and the water is such a small volume that it can in fact freeze. That's ended up posing a bit of an issue because there are a lot of Russian forces down here just south of Zelenskyy that are on these islands in the delta, and they have no way to get off the islands now. You see, because with the area freezing over, the ice creates an environment where boats can't travel at all, but also the ice is so thin you can't walk over it. So there's no way to get off the islands, and the Russians have made it quite clear, at least some in the area, that they're stuck on the islands. This is from a Russian telegram. Everything is very bad. Dnipro Army Group. So, as you know, in addition to repelling the Ukrainian amphibious assault in Krenki, which they did not do, the Dnipro warship is also engaged in fighting for the islands in the Dnipro Delta. Communication with these islands is carried out by boats, the most different origin. What's the point? The Dnipro River suddenly froze over. The ice is very thin. You can't walk on it, but neither can a boat travel on it. The management of GV Dnipro did not react to this natural opportunity. Now we have boys on these islands without transportation, rotation, and evacuation. I quote my friend, "There, the Marines still decide to take one, the 300th, from the island, and they have to carry the boat on the ice straight to the middle of the river. In short, there is no option to wait until it melts, and there are no provisions, and in such a cold, the pit is effed, or for so long. Everyone will have to be sent to the hospital for treatment there at once." Things are not going well for the Russians there. Sounds like it's probably not going to be going well for months until at least the end of February when the temperature finally starts to heat up again, where that ice will melt and the boats are then usable again. The Russians just simply never learn, do they? But meanwhile, while the Russians are never learning, apparently the Ukrainians have finally learned how important of an asset Magyar's Birds, the famous unit of drone pilots that has been doing massive amounts of damage to Russian forces throughout the entirety of the war, how much of an asset they really are to the Ukrainian military. And today, the Ukrainians finally integrated Magyar's Birds into the Ukrainian Marines. So they are now an official part of the Ukrainian Marines. Very cool news, and great to hear that Magyar's unit is finally getting recognition and finally moving on from the Ukrainian army and on into the Ukrainian Marines. Apparently being attributed as a massive asset to the Ukrainian Marine forces in the area that have been fighting in Krenki. The Magyar's Birds are going to be moved under the command of the Marines, so that way they can be further coordinated with the fighting soldiers on the other side of the river. Wonderful news and amazing to hear. And what is no more amazing to hear is what we have up here in Kyiv. It is time for us to hear the speech for President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 692 of the war. Let me make sure that we skip forward to Zelensky's speech and cut out all the additional filler. He talked for a pretty good bit here, but we're only going to do the part where he is on the podium. So let me make sure to get our subtitles up. Let me make sure that they're English.
Професора Шваб, дякую вам за ваш
And I'm so sorry, everyone. I know that he's speaking in English, and then there's a Ukrainian translator over that, and then we have the English subtitles here. Sadly, I cannot remove the translator from the video because he's a part of the video. He's not an audio track like it usually is, so sadly, the translator will have to stay. But I will have the subtitles here, and without further ado, here is the speech.
дуже люб'язне представлення. Президенте, бренде, леді та джентльмени, я високо ціную вашу готовність почути відповіді на справді важливі запитання. Коли закінчиться війна? Чи можлива Третя світова війна? Чи вже час вести переговори з Путіним? Повномасштабна війна в Європі триває вже майже 2 роки. Враховуючи час від початку російської нелегальної анексії нашого Криму, вже триває майже 10 років. І майже 10 років, як Росія втручається в справи африканських країн від Судану до Малі. Сирійська війна, яка досі кровоточить через рішення Путіна довести щось світу, і це триває вже майже 13 років. Насправді, один чоловік вкрав принаймні 13 років миру і замінив їх болем та кризами, які впливають на весь світ. Путін намагається нормалізувати те, що повинно було завершитися в 20 столітті. Масові депортації, знищені до землі міста та села, та жахаюче почуття, що війна ніколи не завершиться. Насправді, Путін є втіленням війни. Ми всі знаємо, що він є єдиною причиною, чому різні війни та конфлікти тривають, і чому всі спроби відновити мир провалилися. І він не зміниться. Він не зміниться. Ми повинні змінитися. Ми всі повинні змінитися такою мірою, щоб безумство, яке перебуває в голові цієї людини або в голові іншого агресора, не перемогло. Путін чесний про те, що він хоче, що він робить, і хто є його цілями. Його відповіддю на тривалість війни є завжди війна, без кінця. Він хоче це в такий спосіб. Його відповіддю на обмеження хаосу у світі є безмежна підтримка терористичних сил. Він насолоджується конфліктами, які приносять страждання іншим. Його відповідь на заклики до миру є постачання більше і більше озброєння з Північної Кореї та Ірану. Режими такі, як це, існують так довго, як ведуть війни. І ми всі у вільному світі існуємо так довго, як можемо захищати себе. Якщо хто-небудь думає, що це лише про нас, лише про Україну, вони фундаментально помиляються. Можливі напрямки та навіть часові рамки нової російської агресії поза Україною стають все більше і більше очевидними. Дозвольте мені запитати, дуже чесно, яка європейська нація сьогодні може надати армію у боєготовності, подібної до української, яка стримає Росію, і скільки чоловіків та жінок ваші держави готові відправити на захист іншої держави? І якщо потрібно боротися з Путіним разом на роки наперед, хіба не краще покінчити з ним та його військовою стратегією зараз, в той час як наші хоробрі чоловіки та жінки вже це роблять. Вони є шансом світу. Вони є. В будь-якій жахливій конфронтації є завжди точка, в якій катастрофу можна зупинити. Україна є цією можливістю. І ми всі у вільному світі повинні бути непохитними у наших бажаннях, діях та цілях. Так само, як Путін є чесним у своїх приречених амбіціях. Ми всі українці, почали наш захист в той час, коли майже ніхто у світі не вірив в Україну. Але ми перевернули гру. І тепер світ перестав вірити в Росію. Навіть теперішні друзі Путіна у Пхеньяні та Тегерані просто використовують його безумство, допоки він досі має технології та ресурси, щоби платити їм. Ніхто не вірить у його майбутнє та не інвестує в нього. І ми, всі з нас, сьогодні, навіть більше, ніж вчора, повинні інвестувати у те, щоби наблизити мир. Мир, який буде справедливим та стабільним. Перед повномасштабним вторгненням ми постійно чули: не ескалюйте. І ми закликали до проактивних дій, санкцій, щоб запобігти воєнній експансії. І нам казали: не ескалюйте. А після лютого 24-го року нічого так не шкодило нашим коаліціям, як цей концепт. Кожне «не ескалюйте» для нас звучало як «ти переможеш для Путіна». Ми просили про нові типи озброєнь, а відповіддю було «не ескалюйте». А потім зброя приїхала, і не було ескалації. Російська ракета впала на територію НАТО. Відповідь була знову «не ескалюйте». Але відплата в цей момент могла навчити Росію багато чому і додала би необхідної впевненості з Заходу. Ми говорили про блокування транзиту підсанкційних товарів в Калінінград. Але відповіддю було «не ескалюйте». Повна сила санкцій могла би змусити Путіна до поступок. Через «не ескалюйте» час було втрачено. І життя багатьох наших найбільш досвідчених воїнів, які боролися з 2014 року, були втрачені. Деякі можливості були втрачені. Урок зрозумілий. Всі думали, що Росія має ракети, які не можна збивати. Петріоти збивають все. Багато хто боявся наслідків, якщо Україна отримає зброю дальнього ураження. А в результаті Росія лише втрачає більше. Ми чули, що Росія ніколи не дозволить зернового коридору без її залучення. Майже 16 мільйонів тонн грузів було транспортовано нашими портами. І ми можемо довести, що Росія примириться з повною втратою свого Чорноморського флоту, який тероризував комерційні судна. І нам потрібно здобути перевагу в повітрі для України. Так само, як ми отримали перевагу в Чорному морі. Ми можемо зробити це. Партнери знають, що необхідно і в яких кількостях це дозволить прогресувати на землі. Лише 2 дні тому ми довели, що Україна може навіть вражати дуже цінні російські військові літаки, які ніхто раніше не збивав. Багато санкційних кроків затримувалися на місяці, навіть роки, тому що вони стикалися з обуренням чи погрозами з Росії. Але жодна з цих погроз не справдилася. Кожне обурення виявилося лише блефом. І як можна бути задоволеним санкціями проти Росії чи експортним контролем, якщо вони навіть не блокують її виробництво ракет? В кожній російській ракеті є критичні компоненти із західних країн. Дюжини компонентів у кожній ракеті, і це правда. Це факт. І, звісно, я вдячний за кожний санкційний пакет. Дякую партнерам, дякую вам. Але наближення миру були нагородою для всіх, хто переймається про те, щоб забезпечити, щоб санкції дотримувалися на 100%. І також це ясна слабкість Заходу, що російська атомна промисловість досі не під санкціями, попри те, що Путін є єдиним терористом у світі, який захопив АЕС у заручники. Повинно бути сильне рішення цього року, коли заморожені російські активи, суверенні та олігархів будуть спрямовані на захист від російської війни та на відбудову України. Путін любить гроші понад усе. Чим більше мільярдів він та його олігархи, друзі чи спільники втратять, тим більш вірогідно він пожалкує про те, що почав війну. Путін повинен пожалкувати. Потрібно, щоб він програв. Нам потрібно, зрештою, розсіяти думку про те, що глобальна єдність слабша, ніж ненависть однієї людини. І ми можемо це зробити. Леді та джентльмени, цей рік повинен бути визначним. Чи може бути замороження війни в Україні її кінцем? Я не хочу задовольнятися трюїзмом, що будь-який заморожений конфлікт зрештою спалахне знову. І я нагадаю вам, що після 2014 року були спроби заморозити війну на Донбасі. Були дуже впливові гаранти цього процесу, тодішній канцлер Німеччини та президент Франції, але Путін є хижаком, який не задовольняється замороженим продуктом. І нам потрібно захищати себе, наших дітей, наші будинки, наші життя. І ми можемо це зробити, і ми можемо побороти його на землі. Ми довели це і на морі, та в небі. І ми нарощуємо виробництво озброєння. Ми досягли економічного зростання в Україні. Наше ВВП зростає, незважаючи на війни. Понад 5% минулого року. І ми отримали рішення Європейського Союзу про відкриття переговорів. І ми нормалізуємо ідею про те, що агресора можна побороти. Навіть агресію Путіна, яка триває вже 10 років та навіть більше. І зараз ми можемо сказати, не ескалюйте всім тим, хто сумніваються, всім тим, хто хоче зменшити підтримку. І в цьому попередженні ми будемо абсолютно праві, тому що кожне зменшення тиску на агресора додає років війні, але кожна інвестиція у впевненість у захисника скорочує війну. Нам потрібно уможливити надання відповідей на найбільш важливі запитання. Війна закінчиться справедливим та стабільним миром. І я хочу, щоб ви були частиною цього миру, починаючи вже від зараз, щоб принести мир, зробити мир ближчим. І нам потрібно, щоб ви були в Україні, будували, відбудовували, відновлювали наші життя. Кожен з вас може бути навіть більш успішним з Україною. І цими днями, прямо тут, в такій прекрасній країні, в Швейцарії, ми зробили ключовий політичний внесок до можливості завершення війни. У нас була найбільш представницька зустріч радників з питань національної безпеки щодо імплементації формули миру. Понад 80 країн та міжнародних інституцій були представлені там. Вчора я мав дуже продуктивні переговори з президентом Швейцарії. Обговорював можливості проведення саміту на рівні лідерів у Швейцарії. Першого саміту, глобального саміту миру. Сьогодні наші команди вже почали роботу над організацією цього саміту. Не Третя світова війна, а глобальний саміт миру. І я запрошую кожного лідера та країну, яка поважає мир та міжнародне право, доєднатися до нас. Разом ми можемо дати відповідь на будь-які ключові запитання. І це будуть найкращі відповіді. Мир повинен бути відповіддю. Дякую вам за запрошення. Дякую вам за увагу. Слава Україні!
And Hurrom Slava. And that was probably one of the longest speeches that we've ever run here on this channel. That thing was almost 15 minutes long from when we started to when we ended right there. But it is time for us to move on into that second segment of the stream. It's an incredibly fun one, and one that I enjoy greatly, because I get to talk to all of y'all about whatever y'all want to talk about. And I also get a moment to thank everyone who's supporting the channel tonight in Super Chats for helping this channel to keep running. Of course, before I even begin, I gotta thank everyone who supports this channel to help it to keep running. There's nothing that forces people to give any support to this channel. You can watch streams for 2 straight years. You can watch 1,500 hours of content right now, and you would not even have to watch a single ad at the moment. And I think that's an absolutely incredible way to run a channel. And thanks to all of y'all who support the channel every single day through your super chats, we are able to help me to keep things running behind the scenes and make a channel like that possible. And I always want to thank everyone who supports the channel. And if you ever think the channel is good enough that you find it worthwhile to support it and help me to stay on air, you can support the channel with a super chat. Everyone who supports the channel with a super chat always gets read off on air and thanked for their support. And if you want to add a comment to the super chat, I'll make sure to address whatever comment you have, whether it be a question, a statement, anything like that. I will make sure to address it. Just wanting y'all to know that because we actually have a decent amount of new people here again tonight. But moving on from that and into this question segment, it's time for us to start off with, and let me make sure I keep track of who I've answered and who I've not. And I think I have a track of everyone so far. And so, moving on to our first super chat of this segment, it is from BC Skyman, who threw in a 20, and he put in the pair, and it said, "Thank you for being you." And thank you, BC Skyman, for being you and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you have made it possible for so long. You've been here since about day 4, keeping this channel running, and it means a lot to me that you're still here with us and helping this thing to keep rolling. So thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one, which is from Say What, who put in a 20 and no comment. But thank you so much once again, Say What, because much like BC Skyman, you didn't throw in a comment, but the support helps us to keep this channel rolling. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. And so thank you so much once again, Say What, and thank you for being a channel legend as well. And not only that, an old guard. And so thank you once again. And we are now moving on to the next one, which is from George A. And George A threw in a 20. Hey! And it's his 3rd super chat on the channel. And not only that, he didn't throw in a comment either. But like I always say, the support is greatly appreciated. And without folks like you supporting this channel, we wouldn't be able to keep on air. So thank you so much once again. And I got to thank everyone who finds this channel worthwhile to support. Nothing makes you support the channel rather than y'all's pure enjoyment and generosity. And I got to thank y'all for that, because y'all make it possible for me to do this as a job. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one, which is from ASV, who threw in a 20. And funnily enough, no comment again. But I got to thank you so much once again, ASV, for that $20 support. It helps the channel to keep rolling. And like I say after every single comment, if it wasn't for your support, we wouldn't be able to stay on air. And so while you didn't leave a comment, that support is greatly appreciated, because it helps me to say so many comments and run tonight what was an amazing 2-hour-long news segment. Probably one of the longest ones that we've had in a bit. I'm very happy to have done it, and I hope that y'all enjoyed the extra detail I was able to throw in. And moving on from that, and thank you once again, ASV, before we move on, but moving on, we also have another 20 from Brian Rowland. And Brian said, "Let Matt know we hope he's doing well. Also, if you ever come to Detroit, you may want to go to the Henry Ford Museum and Greenfield Village. Please take a question from the chat." And y'all better be spooling up those live chat questions, because I'll be grabbing one straight out of the live chat, plucking it like an apple. And also, he is doing quite well. Matthew is, it was a little tough for me to say it the first time, because it literally just happened that day, and I wasn't really wanting to address it then. I was wanting to give it a few days. But the reason why Matthew is no longer on air, just in case you all don't know, is because running this and doing law school is very stressful. And it's something that we have said a good bit on air, actually, but I don't think anyone ever truly got an idea of how stressful it really was until Matthew decided to step down as a co-host and just focus on law school entirely. It is incredibly stressful, and speaking for myself, I know that I've had days where the stress has nearly broken me from doing anything because like last semester during law school, the assignments would build up and the assignments would be incredibly large. And then you have to go to law school almost 30 hours a week in person and then spend loads of time out of class doing things relating to those classes in law school. And then I had to work on top of that 60 hours a week doing this here on YouTube. And all that became really overwhelming because there was very rarely any time at all to do anything else. And so it became very tough for both Matthew and me. But as far as endurance goes on the channel, the reason why I endure and Matthew decided that he didn't really want to endure anymore is because this channel is really my my baby in a way. I founded it over 2 years ago at this point. Have always been interested in seeing it grow and knowing that we have such an amazing community behind us, and you know, all of y'all enjoy the news that we cover every single night. It means a lot to me, regardless of the stress, that I keep this thing running. And so many of y'all have so many suggestions about how I could lower the stress on myself since Matthew is no longer a co-host. And you know, I don't know if he will permanently focus on law school or whether he'll come back. Maybe he'll come back in the future. I have a feeling it probably would be in the summer at this point. But beyond that, however, many of y'all have brought forward suggestions, and I thank every single one of y'all for caring so much to bring forward suggestions, but so many of y'all say that I should sacrifice quality of the show, either the amount of days that we're able to run, or the amount of time I'm able to cover the news, or something along those lines. And something that I don't think those who suggest those things know about me is that I am obsessively warped in the mind to the point everything has to be just right. Like, I have to be able to run it insanely long amounts of time. I have to be able to do whatever I need to do and do it the way I see best. And that's something that I just can't ever listen to viewers. I thank you all, though, for the suggestion, but I can't ever listen to y'all because that would be to sacrifice quality. And I can't sacrifice quality to a community of people like y'all in the Lee Spring Army who have done nothing but shown us the highest quality of affection, appreciation, and not only that, enjoyment. That's one thing that I can never sacrifice quality for, but I thank everyone for caring. And Matthew is doing perfectly fine. Actually, it seems like he's doing a lot better since he's not a co-host anymore, because he's able to free up a lot of his time to do other things. And that's something that I've got to say, you know, it's incredible to see. It's great to know. And not only that, he's able to focus on what he's needing to do, which is to get through law school. And so hopefully that does address that part fairly well, Brian. And also, if I ever do go to Detroit, I have wanted to see the Henry Ford Museum. Now, I haven't heard a lot about Greenfield Village, so let's take a look at Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan. And let's see here. Oh, that's really neat. What is this? I have no idea what that is. It looks like a Halloween thing, but really cool. This looks like a railroad museum, kind of. Now, that is pretty neat. I gotta say, really cool right there. And thank you for the recommendation. This kind of stuff. Oh, is that an Allegheny? I think it is. That is right up my alley. I will make sure to check this place out. And it looks like it's got some German influence to it. It's an Oscar Mayer Wiener car! Hey! That guy in Minnesota, watch out if he sees this thing. Goodness gracious. But beyond that, this is cool. I'm going to make sure to go check out this place. Actually, you know what? Some of it's ringing a bell. I think I've seen this before, but it was deep in the recesses of my head, but really cool. I'll make sure to check this place out. And thank you so much for the suggestion and also supporting the channel and helping it to keep running. And also, we will make sure to take a question from the live chat. So, let's see here. Hopefully we have some good ones. Let's see. And I'll actually answer two, because one of them is kind of like a continuation on the whole thing of what happened with Enforcer Matt and where did he go. So the first one, which is the one that is the live chat, 420 said, what will be the move with China after the anti-communist reunification president was elected, especially with the U.S. not endorsing democracy or Taiwan? And I think the move with China will be containment still, and if they get openly hostile, we'll probably defend the Taiwanese as best as we possibly can. That's what I think the future is probably going to look like, but who really knows? Because U.S. policy in East Asia kind of waffles until the last minute, so it could go either way at this point. It could be the flip of the coin, but I would believe that we would probably continue to support Taiwan, even if the Chinese decide to take action against Taiwan because of their president. And I hope that answers that live chat fairly well. And thank you, Brian, for sponsoring that. And then John Smith said, will you be focusing on law school too, or was Matt falling behind? Oh, good question. Honestly, I don't get to focus on law school a lot. At least as much as I'd like. Like today, I had to deal with the stress of an assignment rolling up, and it has to be done. It's not a graded one, but it has to be done, and I don't really have enough time to do assignments like that. That was a problem I had last semester. That's a problem I'm going to have this semester. And as long as I'm running this YouTube channel, that's probably going to be an issue I'll have until the very end of my days, is not having enough time in the day for everything. However, while that's the case, it's something I believe is necessary. Matthew does have the luxury, though, to choose what he spends his time on. I really don't. You know, as the head of the YouTube channel, as the enforcer, you know, as really everything in my relation to the channel, I don't really have the opportunity to just step back and walk away. And I don't really have the opportunity either, because of my stringent standards of how we do this thing, to give up duties to other people and let them do it for me or anything like that. And so I kind of just have to shoulder the burden of running the channel entirely on my own. It's not really a burden. That actually sounds foreboding. It's not a burden at all. I really enjoy doing this. But I'm going to have to just saddle it all on my own and do my own thing and just make sure to keep the channel running. Some people said, you know, if for a minute before everyone heard the announcement, oh, if Enforcer Matt's gone, people are going to unsubscribe, which is something I actually can't control. You know, because he kind of decided that on his own. So when people said that, that also added a lot more stress to me, because I was like, oh no, what if people unsubscribe because of something I can't control, which is Matthew deciding that law school is more important to him. You know, and that's all the things that I have in my back pocket. There's a lot of stress things, you know, there's loads, endless amounts of stress things that go into running this channel, but it really is what it is. And even though it takes away from me being able to focus on law school, this is something I have a feeling will probably outshine law school, because, you know, when you think about it, law school is great and all, and of course, getting to the point where I can take the bar and pass the bar and become an actual licensed attorney, that's wonderful and all, but who in their life gets the chance to head a massive community of people that is 157,000 strong and growing right now by the day, and who gets the community to do that? And not only that, raise $1.4 million for nonprofits that are helping to save lives and change lives inside of Ukraine and actually support America's strategic interests in a big picture. That's something that you'll never get to do. Like, you know, no one will ever be able to have an impact like that, or at least I will never have a chance to have an impact like this in my life again. And that's why I can't step away, because I know how big of an impact this has and how much it means. And that's the reason why, even if it takes away from me focusing on law school, I won't, you know, go and, you know, just run away. That would be silly. I've been here forever. And on top of that, it's not just that, it's that there's sick people out there who just wish the worst for us. Like, when people heard that Enforcer Matt went to go focus on law school, some people made it out there in the world to sound like that was a great thing and that they had somehow gotten this channel and ripped it apart or something like that. That's really weird to me, and I kind of got to make sure to spite those people and piss them off just by merely existing as well, kind of as a secondary note, because my raw existence at this point pisses off one loser incredibly so. And so I have to make sure to stay on air until they, you know, until something happens to them, so that way I can make sure to just piss them off until their dying days and live in their head rent-free. So that's another reason why I have to make sure that this channel runs the way it does. Because I gotta piss that asshole off. Like, that's part of it. But the other part is that the massive impact to Ukraine it has, that's a big thing too. And so with that, I hope that and also another thing is that Lauren is correct. Lauren said, the Enforcer, this is a fun part of his day. It is, because the entire day, I don't ever get to talk anything like this to anyone. A lot of people don't get that in depth with how I talk about things. And so when I say things like this, it goes way over people's heads, and I lose people in conversations very easily because people don't focus on this. I mean, that's their thing. That's their interests. So this is a very deep rabbit hole we go in every night on this channel, and a lot of people don't do that in the war in Ukraine. And so that's why, I gotta, that's why I really enjoy doing this, because I get on air and talk about things here that I don't get to talk about anywhere else. And it means a lot to me. And that's a really big part of it too. I just greatly enjoy this side of things. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And also I saw someone say, seek professional help. Nah, I'm good. I'm good. But I'm telling you, man, when it comes to pissing people off, I'm not really a big fan of doing that. Usually I actually like to smooth things over and not piss people off. But when they just threaten us constantly, with harm, like this particular person I'm talking about, they threatened to come down here to Alabama and try and do something to us. And at this point, considering that it went from just, an issue with the channel to an issue with us, I got to make sure to piss this person off to the fullest. I mean, that's what we got to do. And they're just never going to stop either. They're just never going to stop. We give them a chance so many times, and they're just never going to learn, and we got to teach them a lesson, a good lesson, because it's absolutely insane. We have not mentioned them for, hell, 6 months at this point. And this poor bastard, he just can't get us out of his head. Either we've given him PTSD, it traumatized him because he just wouldn't leave us alone. But whatever it was, hey, I got to keep it up. I got to make sure that we're torturing people out there with our mere existence. But beyond that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping the channel to keep on running, Brian, because folks like you have helped to make this thing possible. And Viosta said, is a professional, come at me, bro. Yeah, not really, because honestly, in real life, whenever anyone gets pissed, I'll be like, oh, hey, man, let's calm down. Let's find out why you're pissed off, and maybe we can work on finding an amicable solution. Which is what we did here on YouTube. But, when you deal with YouTube psychos that are drug addicts and their real parents and their adopted parents have abandoned them because they're just that crazy, and then they decide to take out that craziness on you, and then the rest of the community watches that craziness happen for months, just, unsolicited, and then you take action against them because they're crazy, and then everyone wants to act like you're the bad guy because you're smacking around a crazy person. At that point, kind of was like, you know what, we gotta stick with this, and regardless, if the guy wants to keep it going, hey, I'm fine. It's not really affecting me that much, and apparently we just live in the guy's head rent free, and every once in a while I get reminded that the guy is still thinking about us, and I gotta say, I wish I could find a girlfriend that thought about me as much as that guy, because I'd feel truly loved at that point. But anyways, moving on from that, it's time for us to get on to the next super chat, which is from Gerald Mansfield, who threw in a 20, and no comment, but he just threw in a 20. But the support means a great deal, and I gotta thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make the thing possible. Folks like you make it possible for me to spite the haters and keep this channel running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so thank you so much once again, and I hope I was able to address that well. And with that, we're moving on to the next one, which was the first one of the night. This one was from Doug, who threw in a 10. And hey, and I thank you so much, Doug, for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because folks like you help to make this thing possible. And if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. So thank you so much once again. And thank you for helping this channel to keep running, because hey, you are making it possible. No comment, but still the support says a lot and helps me to say a lot. And so with that, we are on to the next one, which is from Duke Savage. I'm just kidding, it's Duke Savage. But he threw in a 10 euro super chat and no comment either. And I gotta thank you for that. And so with that, I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because you've made it possible. You're helping to make it possible tonight. And thanks to the the Lee Spring Army's continued support of the channel, we're able to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one, which is from Heather Fitzgibbon, LSA, who threw in a 10 and said thank you, and a little Shiba Inu touching his cheeks and kind of moving around. And ain't that cute? Ain't that just the cutest thing? And I gotta thank you so much for the support, Heather Fitzgibbon, LSA, and thank you for appreciating this channel and helping us to keep this thing rolling. Because with folks like you around, we will be able to keep this thing on air. And so with that, we are on to the next one, which is from K Foy, who threw in a 10, and this is your first super chat ever, according to YouTube. Hey! And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support does help us to keep this thing rolling, and thank you so much once again. And actually, to really quickly take a question to address your super chat to a live chat, John Smith said, "Enforcer, you still screwing with them through the legal system? Does being a student of law help?" Nah, being a student of law doesn't help at all, because that's something done on an attorney's end. You know, you can't really practice law unless you're a licensed attorney. And no, we stopped, because the reason being is that there's this thing in law called a process of service. And you have to be able to serve someone properly to move a lawsuit forward. And you see, I gotta tell you, I don't know what was up with this guy, but this guy was like a, he had gone through sniper school as far as camouflage and concealment went, because no matter where the process server went, they could never get the guy. And also he started to threaten physical harm and injury to process servers who tried to serve the guy. So we had to end up trying to go through great lengths to end up having him served. I had to end up wasting a good day of my time figuring out where he was in Kyiv, what hotel he was staying in, so that way I could try and get a process server in Ukraine to go serve him over there. It was an endless cycle of just trying to get the weasel when he wasn't hiding, because apparently the guy must have gone through some legal trouble before, because he knew how to hide from process servers like he was El Chapo running through the tunnels in Mexico. So going off of that, no, we stopped, and the guy's still out there running his mouth. But you know something that's really important to remember? I think this is something always important. The legal system exists, so that way things don't get resolved by people out of court. Because you know how people resolve things out of court? It's ugly. It's real ugly, I'll tell you that. And thank God I'm not one of those people. Because if it was like what the legal system was set up to avoid, oh, that would not be good. But I just wanted to make sure to put that out there, because I just don't get it. The guy can't get us out of his mouth, and I don't understand it. Because we've completely stopped talking about the guy for months on end. Everyone around him said, hey, don't talk about those guys anymore. Just ignore them. They're just bad guys for trying to, you know, stop you from saying absolute lies about them. And so he went, oh, okay. And then literally, I think it was like 2 months later, he starts up again. And I don't know, maybe the rest of everyone else noticed. I don't think so. But you know, hey, it's a virtuous community here on YouTube. But anyways, moving on from that, I gotta thank you so much once again for support, K-Boy, and I hope that does answer that well. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is from Nathan Cox, who threw in a 10, and he said, "All aboard, choo-choo!" Because earlier in the stream, Nathan Cox said, "Why don't you, you know, cut down the stream time?" I was like, "There ain't stopping this train, baby!" And of course, Nathan Cox said, "All aboard," threw in a 10. And I gotta thank you for the support, Nathan, and I gotta thank you for enjoying that, because folks like you helped to make this thing possible. And if it wasn't for folks like you, I wouldn't be able to be on air right now. And so with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 5 from Matt Scher. And he threw in the dancing pair. That's your 20th super chat to the channel. Truly phenomenal. And I got to thank you for the support, Matt Scher, and helping this channel to keep running, because folks like you make it possible. We're now moving on to the next one, which is a 5 from Neil Vizanon, who said, LSA! Which is more dangerous, being a Russian general in Ukraine or being a red shirt in Star Trek? And I would say, let's see. Let's see here. I'm trying to understand what that said right there. I don't know what that means, but we'll be looking at that. Anyways, I would say that being a Russian general at this point has got to be deadlier than being a red shirt in Star Trek. But, I mean, a lot of red shirts died in the name of progress in Star Trek, so, you know, I wouldn't have to crunch the numbers, but I think the Russian generals do beat them out at this point. But still, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Neil, because you're helping to make this thing possible. And with that, we are moving on to the next one, which is, we actually got 2 of them, 2 $5 Canadian super chats from Marc-Andre Brunette, a true channel legend. And he said, "There's nothing free in the world. Sending my $5 is a way of saying thank you. I will always remember this channel, sir." And thank you so much, Marc-Andre Brunette, for supporting the channel and helping it to keep running. That is true. Nothing is free in the world, and believe it or not, every single YouTuber out there covering the war makes a living doing this. And I'm certainly one to not kid around about that at all. Running a YouTube channel like this full time is a business. And at the end of the day, we have to be able to support ourselves running this thing to make it possible. And folks like you, Marc-Andre, supporting the channel through your super chat, make it possible for me to do this every single night, 6 days a week. And I got to thank you so much once again for that support, and I thank you for saying that you'll always remember this channel, because it's great to know that it will be an unforgettable channel, and something maybe that people will look back in the day, because it literally chronicles the war day by day, and gives an exact outlook of what the battlefield looked like, and even the footage that came out of it on those days. But with that, and moving on to our next one from Mark, he said, in the next $5 super chat, he said, the soil don't disappear, it's satellite imagery can find it if it is true, ... And that is true. Maybe the satellite imagery can find that thing that's in Chinese. Maybe. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much once again for support, Mark, and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 5 from James Dunn. And he said, good luck running the channel solo. We will miss him. And don't worry if you need any breaks someday. And I gotta tell you, it would be nice to take a break. I'm not going to lie. Taking a break is something that my family actually talks about a lot, because believe it or not, the last time I took a vacation was 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I started college. And since then, I have been so busy, before this YouTube channel even began, and especially after this YouTube channel began, that I have never been able to take a single vacation over the course of 4 years. Now, that's something that a lot of people are going to be like, damn, that's kind of wild. You ought to take a vacation and take a break. But it's really hard to do that, because other people out there are kind of selfish in a way with how they can, you know, at least how I look at it in my perspective of what I'm doing here. A lot of people can be selfish, and a lot of people can go, oh, I'm going to go enjoy my life, live life to the fullest, you know. Go hang out at bars, go drink, go get drunk, go, just go on vacations and crap, pretty much. I don't really feel like that's appropriate in my role. I'm covering a war, and it's always something that is that's always weighing in the back of my mind, is that I'm covering a war, and I'm showing footage, and while I'll sit there and I'll make light of it, I will not kid y'all at all. I get off air, and I do kind of get haunted from time to time from some of the videos I've seen that I've not been able to show y'all on air when making this channel. And I understand what's going on over there and how bad it really is. And that weighs on me whenever I think about taking a vacation or anything like that. Because it's like, if I take a vacation, there's probably, in the course of that vacation, several hundred Ukrainian soldiers that will have died in between the time I left and came back. And I was not here documenting their story and their sacrifice that they pretty much made to defend their country and move forward the strategic interests of this Western world. That's something that always weighs on the back of my mind whenever I think about taking days off. And that's why I've rarely ever taken a day off. I think I've only taken 3 days off by choice, and beyond that, I've never taken days off. And those days were when I was having just critical breakdowns from stress overload. And then I think I took about 4 or 5 days off from COVID, and that was not by choice. I just couldn't even talk those 5 days. But that's why I never really take days off. Now, let's see. And Olam Drab said, getting out among people on an evening might help. Even people actually fighting need a bit of R&R sometimes. And yeah, I know, but at the same time, I know I have it as tough as the fighting guys. I'm just sitting over here covering what they're doing. But at the same time, I know how tough they have it. And even going all the time, it's still not as tough as they have it. And on top of that, I do get out. There is, every once in a while, every week, there's a few hours where I do get out with some friends and I go and enjoy hanging out with them. But at the same time, I don't really, I don't really want a vacation or anything. That's, a big thing to me. But still, thank you so much once again for supporting the channel, James. And I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're moving on into the next one. And also, let me check that out. Thank you for pointing that out, Lauren. I'll make sure to look into this here real quick. Let's see. He's a little bit further up in the chat, isn't he? Because I saw him here a moment ago. Let's take a look. Let's take a look. Where is he? Oh, here we go. Rosia Moshi. Uh-huh. I see. He's throwing in some Russian phrases. Keep an eye on that man. and let me know. Oh, wait a minute. Yep, everyone's confirming what he said now. Let me, oh yeah, he said victory is Russia's, right? Yep, that's it. He's gone. Hate to see it. Hate to see it, but he's gone. Hate to see it. It's bots. I miss him. But anyways, moving on from that and into our next one. Eric S. threw in a 5, and he said, I wish you continued success. Make sure you graduate, please, and take care. And thank you so much for the kindness. And thank you so much for wishing continued success and wishing that I graduate. Of course, that's a big goal of mine, and I am going to make sure that I graduate law school. I'm going to make sure I pass that bar, and I'm going to make sure I become the President of the United States. If anything I've learned that a leader is a very tough thing to come by. In my honest opinion, over the past 20 years, I have not seen a leader of this nation that I would call a true leader. I haven't really seen many of them in this nation's history. And hopefully, by the time 2040 comes around and I'm able to be a candidate in the election, hopefully people will see that I have the best intentions for the nation and vote me in so that way I can hopefully do what the nation needs to continue to survive. And so thank you so much once again for the wish of continued success, Eric S., because hopefully I will be able to continue to have success so that way I can bring success to the nation. And so thank you so much once again, Eric. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one, which is from Junebug72, who threw in a 5 and said, keep it up, and I will make sure to keep it up. And thank you so much for keeping the channel running, Junebug72, because you're helping me to keep it up. And with that, we're moving on to our next one, which is from Butchie777, which is a 5. And he said, keep it up, and hey! I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for wanting us to keep it up, Butchie777. And also, really quickly, I gotta address Doug's super chat. He threw in a 10. And he said, LSA, hello there. Hey, what want a plan? Hey! I gotta do it. Hang on, let me go get it. Oh, buddy. It's that time of the night. Oh, hello there. You want a plan? Oh, dude, I love this thing. I'm glad that you brought that up. Because honestly, at this point, with how the news runs, there's not really a lot of time for me to put in comedic relief. And I love that y'all throw in like little comedic relief opportunities in the super chats. Because it gives me a moment to joke around. But, oh, I know that. Oh, not a problem. But still, thank you so much once again for the support and helping the channel to keep running, because folks like you help to make this thing possible. And with that, we are going to be moving on to the next one. But thank you for a little bit of a marmot moment, Doug, because every night is a marmot night. And also, Lynn asked a live chat. They said, why did you go to Ukraine? Wow, did you go to Ukraine at the Enforcer? No, I did not go to Ukraine. There's a particular reason why. Going to Ukraine for common folks who do not cover the war supports the Ukrainian economy and is absolutely wonderful to do. But if I go over there as a Ukraine war news reporter and I kind of just hang out in Ukraine, I feel like that's kind of trying to virtue signal a little bit too much. Because by going to Ukraine, one, there's a big benefit for me because rent is literally non-existent in Ukraine. You could practically live there right now for nothing because of the war. So it would really be kind of a thing to benefit me. Two, going over there, I feel like it's one of those virtue signaler things where you go around and you take pictures dozens of miles behind the lines like some kind of a James Vasquez wannabe and pretend like, you know, oh, look at me, I'm doing something to help out the war. When in reality, you're doing nothing and you're just going around and taking pictures to make it look like you are. You know, and it's great to people who bring in like drones and everything like that. But, you know, beyond that, you're just kind of being there to be there. You could be in Poland and coordinate all of your efforts in Poland and then just quickly hop into Ukraine, and the entire time you're there, you're supporting them and helping them out in their war effort, and then hop right back to Poland. So that way it doesn't look like you're just trying to ride on the coattails of the Ukraine war. The fourth reason is because I simply would not have the ability to go to Ukraine. I'm a full-time law school student, and on top of that, this channel takes around 60 hours to run. And with the time of day it runs in, that means I would have to be up at, I would have to get up at 10 o'clock at night, Ukraine time, to be able to get this channel ready, and the news ready, for the stream to run at 3 a.m. in the morning, Ukraine time. And that would be physically impossible to do that in Ukraine. And keep with the timetable. Another thing that would be next to impossible for me to go to Ukraine for is it would be quite difficult. I don't speak a lot of Ukrainian, and there are a decent amount of Ukrainians that speak English, but I feel like when you travel to foreign countries that speak a different language than English, it is at least courteous to learn their language and at least try and speak it when you're in their country. Otherwise, you just end up being the ignorant foreigner. That's the way I look at it, so that's also a huge problem as well. And also, on top of that, it seems to me a little self-serving to spend money, like Miss Disa said, a little self-serving to spend money on yourself in a country that's at war. That's kind of a big thing to me, because it's one thing to spend your money here in America because, you're just living your life over here. But while you're in Ukraine, it's like there's a whole war being fought. So spending in excess and doing anything in excess at all seems to be a little bit too exorbitant and splurgy for what's happening over there. And so that's kind of the whole thing, those are kind of all the 5 reasons I can come up with as to why I would not go to Ukraine and why I also haven't gone to Ukraine. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one, which is from Minkov and Shaiskov. But still, he said, Matt, mustache fun, desperately needed. And I'll let him know, you might need a mustache. I have one. I have a goatee, though. But still, thank you so much once again. And thank you for helping the channel to keep running. And moving on from that into our next one, we had a 2-pounder from Hoagie 1080, who said, get yourself a Bud Light, y'all. And hey, thank you so much for putting in the y'all. and I don't drink, actually. I'll let y'all know that. I do not drink, don't do any kind of drugs. I try and stay as sober as possible because a lot of people enjoy their time. They drink, they do drugs, stuff like that. I would never have the time to do that, and I don't really have the inclination to do that either, because, beyond just kind of having a little bit of a good time, to me, it's a little unproductive, and I want to make sure to be as productive as possible. And, of course, with the days I have where I wake up and I go about 20 hours a day from when I wake up to when I go to sleep, there isn't really any time to even have a drink if I wanted one. But still, I thank you so much for the support. Maybe I'll just get one to put up on the counter behind me to show off on stream whenever we go on camera. But with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one, which is from Neil Vizanon, who threw in a 2. And he said, why Russia dig tunnels? There I have Chris's mom. Oh, Neil, you're killing it. You're killing it, Neil. And that's a good point. Why in the world dig all these deep, endless tunnels when you have Chris's mom? And why put the Russian army in them? Because that hot dog guy in Minnesota could suck as much as them. But anyways, with that, thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep running. And it, lo and behold, looks like we have run out of super chats. Shockingly enough. Shocking, I have to say. I don't really know what to make of that. So, with that, we're moving on into the live chats. So, I'm going to be addressing live chats, and if you want anything addressed, throw it in. I might be able to try and address it. And so, Quantum Fighter said, at the Enforcer, how do you project, sadly, Quantum Fighter, I don't think I can read that one, because I'm not understanding it at the moment, but if you want to resend it, please do, and I'll try and reread it and answer it. But let's see. Lin said, ha 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 ha. I really wish you could become president of the Philippines at the Enforcer. Oh, thank you. That would be cool. The Philippines is going through a little bit of turbulent times right now. That'd probably be a neat country to be in charge of. But once again, American born and raised. Sadly, America's the only thing I can try and become the president of. But I thank you for the high praise. That's very nice of you, Lin. And moving on from that, let's see. Philip Fixes said, Enforcer, the best way to respect those who die for your freedom is to be as successful as you can be and as helpful. And I'd certainly agree with you, Philip Fixes. I think that being helpful is the best thing that can be done because there's so many people out there in the world that are counting on each other, and it's great to know that they are able to count on us in a small way. And so with that, thank you so much once again for throwing that in. Very nice little compliment. And also, Riddle Me This said, did you hear about the Ukrainian secret weapons Zelenskyy said took out 26 helicopters in a single day? I have not. And I'd have to say, I have to look into that to get a little bit more info. Moving on from that, though, Lin threw in another one, said, okay, Enforcer, just travel here in the Philippines, and then we'll wait for you here. Lots of American warships and jet fighters are in the Philippines. We do not have war, but they are here. And that's true. There's a lot of U.S. bases that are inside the Philippines, and there's a lot of them that are actually starting to get built from the ground up right now as a part of our Chinese containment policy. But maybe one day I will be able to come to the Philippines, because I know that we have a decent amount of viewers who are from the Philippines, and it'd be cool to travel around and get to meet all of y'all. Really cool place and a really neat nation with an interesting and rich history. But moving on from that, let's see. Troll Police said, I've noticed more and more Warhammer 40k imagery on logos, etc. in the videos. Is there a reason for that? Yes, there is. The reason why is because Ukrainians, a lot like many people, really like Warhammer 40k. Don't really know why it's such a liking that they're now making their symbology, but still, that is the case. Maybe it's because in the Warhammer 40k world, they fight orcs. The Imperium of Mankind is fighting one of the factions, which is orcs, but there's a lot of them. There's the Tau, which are like space commies, and then there's the Necrons. There's the Chaos people. I forgot what they're called, but there's a lot of them. And then there's little elves, but they're kind of like a smaller group. And then there's, let's see, what else? There's the little cicada things. I forgot what those are, but there's a lot of them, but one of them is orcs. And that may be why they're going with a lot of Warhammer 40k symbology, because they're viewing themselves as like the Imperium of Mankind or something, although none of the groups in Warhammer 40k are anything to aspire to. It is a living hell, that little fantasy world is. But with that, I hope that does address that well, Troll Police. And moving on to C. Gots, he said, do you think Ukraine could end up with Russian territory with the eventual peace treaty? It's possible, but I'd still say at this point it's mostly unlikely. I think they will end up giving back the land to Ukraine that they took, at least most of it, and the most important one, Crimea. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And let's see, Eugene Minton said, as far as the tunnels from the Russians, as a point, I do feel they are fake. I think they are actually walking around in a circle, showing the same segments and over. Wiring missing. And that may be true. I mean, a lot of people believe that the tunnels are in fact fake because they're just too extensive and too well made. And that may be another furtherance of the idea that those tunnels are in fact an entire fib and not actually real. So I would agree with you there. Very interesting observation, Eugene, and thank you for sharing that with me. And Seagot said, do you think Ukraine could end up with Russian territory like Rostov-on-Don? With the eventual peace treaty? No, I don't think Ukraine is ever going to end up with any actual Russian territory, because Ukraine's war is purely a defensive one, and they're only seeking to regain their 1991 borders. So I don't ever think they'll get a part of Russia as a part of a peace treaty or an agreement. But with that, Rextaus Twin Moon said, Enforcer in-law or Javelin? No discussing of pros and cons. Just pick which one sounds cooler. Javelin. Because, come on, I mean, in-law, it sounds like you're firing your mother-in-law. You know, like, a javelin sounds cool. That's just my opinion, though. C. Gotts then asked, do you think Ukraine could end up with Russian territory like Rostov-on-Don? I don't think so. And let's see, C. Gotts asked that several more times, so we'll be moving on down to Riddle Me This, who said, have you heard about the Mattis air defense system, and what's your opinion of it? Sadly, I haven't really heard a lot about the Mattis air defense system, but we can pull it up real quick and find out. This is the ground-based air defense system. Let's find out a little bit more about it. Unfortunately, I'm not getting a good enough overview of that thing to actually give a clear answer. But with that, I'm gonna have to declare ignorance on that one right now, and I hate to say that, Riddle Me This, but I'll try and get back to you with an answer sometime. And Enforcer said, "What was that fantasy game title you talked about?" I'm shopping for a new game. Oh, no, Lauren, don't do it. Warhammer 40k is the name. Warhammer 40k is probably one of the most expensive games out there in the world to play because the minifigures that you play that tabletop game with are like hundreds of dollars sometimes. Really, really expensive. It's a very interesting little fantasy world, though, with a lot of interesting lore behind it. So it's cool to read about and learn about, just like all the lore side of things for Warhammer 40k. But playing it, you've got to be like a millionaire to play that game because it is just prohibitively expensive. But it's pretty neat. I'll show you a little bit about it. Let's see, Warhammer 40k. So let's see here. Oh yeah, every time you pull up Warhammer 40k now, a picture of Henry Cavill pops up. But Warhammer 40k is this kind of stuff right here. This is actually a Space Marine. I believe that is an Ultramarine, Space Marine, but there's like loads of chapters of the Ultramarines. But regardless, it's a really interesting little like side shoot thing. There's video games about Warhammer 40k. There's all kinds of stuff. I think these right here, yeah, these are actually the orcs in Warhammer 40k. So all kinds of interesting stuff about Warhammer 40k. If you're interested in it, the company that owns Warhammer 40k is called Games Workshop, GW. And they're the ones who make all of the minifigures, and they violently protect their territory when it comes to copyright and copyright infringement. Something that some people just don't know about. That when you make something, it is copyright. And these guys at Games Workshop, they enforce copyright like no other. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And let's see, C. Gott said, could the tunnels be in actual Russia near the front lines? They could be. But I have a feeling they probably built those maybe inside Russia at a training field if they're fake. But I hope that addresses that well. And Philly said, Enforcer, after doing an amazing job reporting this war for the past however many days, what is your best prediction for Ukrainian-Russian advancements by the end of 2024? At the moment, it's not looking that good. I think we'll probably see some Ukrainian advances, but it's not going to be war ending at this point. I think this war is probably going to drag on another year or two. But I think in the future, the Ukrainians will probably be the ones to make advances, while the Russians will either just retain their territory or lose some of it. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one, which says, Ukraine is seeing up to 10 cases a day of Russian forces using munitions filled with toxic chemicals against Ukrainian troops and civilians. Is this a red line? And technically, yes, it would be. That would certainly be a red line if there ever was one, because that's one of the nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons that the U.S. said if the Russians used, that would be a violation of the rules of war. I don't know why I stuttered through that so hard. And it will require immediate U.S. armed intervention. So that technically would be crossing the line. And Gregory Huey said, Enforcer, but perhaps Finland might get Karelia back if Russia collapses? And maybe, I mean, that would be wild, though. Think about that. Think if the Finnish border went back down to around here, just north of St. Petersburg. Wouldn't that be crazy? That would be crazy. I'm not even going to lie. That would be insane. But it could happen. You know, you'd never know. That could actually happen. But if Russia collapses, I have a feeling that border would stay the way it is, because the Russians, being Russians, kind of Russified the area. And so I think they'd probably keep it that way. Also, really quickly, I got to get to Notorious GRG's super chat. I got to get to two of them, actually. Notorious GRG said, with his $5 super chat, hey, thank you so much for the support. He said, Frank Sinatra saying, I got to be me, and you got to be you. Long live the Enforcer and the LSA, and please take a question from the chat. And thank you so much once again for saying we got to be me. Well, I got to be me. I got to be me, and I got to do my thing. And I thank you for appreciating that, and I thank everyone for enjoying the channel so much. As a matter of fact, throughout the course of the past few days, the support has been incredibly overwhelming, and I've got to thank every one of y'all for supporting me during this very difficult time in the channel's history, as I'm now running the thing solo and have been for 4 or 5 days now. And I also got to thank you all for respecting Matthew's decision, because Matthew was an absolutely incredible co-host. And if anyone deserved to be able to take the time to focus on their law school and things that were important for their long-term life goals, it certainly was Matthew, without a doubt. And I got to thank everyone for backing up the channel every single way. And so with that, we will make sure to take a question from the chat. And this one goes to Halligan218. He says, is there any word why the F-16s are still delayed? No, sadly not. We're not getting a lot of news about F-16s anymore, which is a little disappointing, but hopefully we'll get to hear more about them in the near future. And let's see, and I hope that does address that well, and thank you for sponsoring that, Notorious GRG. And with that, we're on to the next one, which is from James Dunn, who threw in a 5. He said, you're not a true Warhammer fan if you don't hate Games Workshop, LOL. You know, that's true. That's true. Just because they kind of, you know, make the prices really high and everything. But beyond that, I have to be honest, y'all. I can't get mad at companies like Disney or Games Workshop that protect their copyrights, because people are kind of under a misconception in the world. Actually, funnily enough, in this semester, I'm taking a class on property, and one of the parts of the class is actually about intangible property, copyrights, trademarks, and all that kind of stuff. And the law respects your ability to create, especially when it comes to the intellectual aspect. That's where copyrights come into play. Copyright exists on any work that is yours and original. And as far as anything on YouTube goes, really any content that anyone makes on the platform is their own work. It is copyrighted. Like, for example, if you took Markiplier's video and you just played it entirely on your channel, that is straight up copyright infringement. In fact, if you play any part of it, that is copyright infringement. The thing is, though, is that people don't understand that fair use is not something that shields you from copyright infringement claims. That is an active defense against a copyright infringement claim. So that means someone says, you infringed on my copyright, and then you say, well, I did, but it's excusable because it's fair use. That's actually how fair use arguments go in the law. There's no such thing as this lawsuit's wrong because I didn't infringe on copyright. If you use anything of anyone else's, technically it is infringement. It's just that you can come up with an act of defense to say that for some reason it was fair use. And that's how it works. And also, 420 said, fair use applies with reactions somewhat, but it kind of depends on the context. Courts have actually ruled in different ways to how people react to content depending on how they did react to the content. If they're reacting to it by kind of just playing it in the background and talking over it, that's raw infringement, no question. If they use anything copyright for that matter, it really is infringement. But they can try and assert that the way they infringed on the copyright fell under fair use, therefore it was fine. And that's something that a lot of people don't get, and that's something that we've run into before, because wouldn't it be a shame if everyone on the internet could just take what you made, your own unique work, that you put all of your time and effort and your brain power into making, and then someone was able to just rip it from you and make it their own? That would be pretty messed up. And that's what the laws are for. And so, with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are moving on to the next one, which is, and let me make sure, let me check real quick, got to double check. This is from James Dunn, who threw in, getting back to your super chat though, that's why I can't really hate them for that, because some people hate them for that reason, but I mean, they do have a legal right to protect their copyrights, and that's just a part of life. That's also something we have to deal with on YouTube's end, because every once in a while, people do try and enforce their copyrights here on YouTube, and that's something that everyone who ever creates an original work has the right to do. And, you know, saying that you can just rip people's work and not give them any credit, well, for that matter, just rip their work without their permission, because that's really what copyright infringement is. That is something that, you know, I can't really blame people for, because they have a legal right to it. But with that, hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one, which is from Butchie777, who threw in a 10-pound super chat. And he said, the U.S. military owns the copyright to the digital camo. I bought a skydiving rig with digital camouflage print. The company was told to stop using it by the military. And that is somewhat true, actually. There are companies out there that own copyright. Well, actually, I believe that would be a patent, because that certain kind of a camouflage pattern would probably fall under a patent infringement of some kind with how the printing was done on the pattern. That's something I think would fall under a patent infringement, but I have to go back and check. But nevertheless, there are trademarks, there are trade secrets, there are patents, there are copyrights. Each one of them serves a different purpose. And interestingly enough, you don't want to use the copyright for everything. Trademarks are for like company logos and things like that. That's trademarked. Patents are for technological innovations, and those actually have a much shorter lifespan than a copyright. A copyright actually lasts the lifetime of the creator and 70 years after their death. And that, 70 years after their death, that's passed on to their immediate next of kin. And then trademarks, they never expire. The trademark can last forever. There is no expiry date to a trademark. But still, interesting stuff about the law. But still, interesting to hear that, Butch777, and very, just very interesting here. The military apparently may own the patent or something along those lines of that pattern of camo. But moving on from that, and back into our live chats, Doug said, the Enforcer, I need a good, fun, and reliable lever-action rifle. What's your pick? Great question, Doug, because I wouldn't probably have an exact pick for a lever-action. It's something that I don't really shoot a lot. I mean, the only lever action I had was a 22 Henry way back when I got my first gun. And I haven't had a 22 since. So sadly, I wouldn't be able to tell you a good lever action. But with that, we're moving on to the next one. Marietchin said, the Enforcer, my husband just subscribed me to Patreon. We will always stay behind you. You will be the President of the United States in 2040. And thank you so much for the hype. And thank you for subscribing to the Patreon. Because folks like you help us to keep this thing running, Marietchin, and thank you to your husband for doing a great cause and helping us to keep this thing running. And Linlin said, I really want the Enforcer to be the President of America. I wish I'm still alive by then. I think there's an age limit. He's still too young. Yes, I'm still too young. I have to be 35 or older to run for president. And Riddle Me This said, the Enforcer, I think you should copyright the LSA Honey Badger. An interesting story. We actually do own the copyright to the LSA Honey Badger. We also own the copyright to our logo, which is that little image that we use, the name, and a couple of other things as well. But I'm not going to get into like what we own copyrights to on everything. But the Honey Badger was actually made by a viewer that that is actually well, goes by the name Avogadro's Number, and they made the Lee Spring Honey Badger, well, the Lee Spring Army Badger for the channel, and we asked them, because we were going to make merchandise with it, you know, could we own the rights, the copyright to this little honey badger? So we actually signed a contractual agreement with them that gave us the rights, the copyright to the honey badger. So we actually own the copyright to the honey badger. So, you know, if anyone used it out there and, you know, did anything with it, we actually would have a right to sue because we own the copyright to it. And Angry Penguin said, ooh, the Enforcer is a good person to ask for this. Yes, that is right. Because copyright is good stuff, and I gotta respect it, gotta love it. And Linlin said, in what party are you gonna run, the Enforcer? That I don't really want to get into, because we always want to make sure to keep the channel politically neutral. And while I have my own beliefs politically, they're actually not that mainstream. Probably wouldn't even fall under either of the two parties. And for that reason, I'm kind of, you know, just riding down the middle, riding down the fence. So, and also on top of that, I don't want to divide Ukraine war supporters on small domestic matters, because that wouldn't be good for the short term of the Ukraine support. You know, and we can always delve into the political side of things once Ukraine's over. But for now, I want to make sure to keep this thing purely, solely, entirely politically neutral and keep politics out. But with that, hope that does address that well, and thank you once again. And Seagot said, Enforcer, has either nation been able to build up their military industrial capabilities since the war started? Yes, Ukraine certainly has been able to, because we've seen multiple companies move in and start producing weapons there. And so with that, hope that does address that well. And moving on from that and into our next one, and I think this is going to be the final one of the night. Let's see, actually, I don't think I'm seeing a final one of the night. So I'm going to wait for a couple of more chats to come in. Hopefully we'll have a good question to round out on here. But in the meantime, let's see. GW said the Hungry Marmot Party. Yeah, that'd be a good one. I like that. The Hungry Marmot Party. Delicious. But let's see here. I think we will have... let's see here. Yes, in Saxu, you are correct. Y'all have a established party called the Monster Raving Loony Party, and I think Lord Buckethead is the guy in charge of that one. Funny thing. But let's see here. We're still waiting for a good last question. And so we are on to the final question of the night, and it's from Corey Ray, who said, The Enforcer, good afternoon, brother. Hope you're staying warm this morning. May you have a blessed night. And thank you so much for the support. Oh, not the support, but thank you so much for the kind words, Corey Ray. And I'm having a pretty good night, actually. It's 12 o'clock midnight here, and I gotta enjoy it. But thank you so much once again for wishing me a great night. And hopefully I will continue to have a great one after I go to sleep and get ready to wake up in the morning to deal with law school. And that, you know, might be canceled because of the cold and everything. It's like 16 degrees Fahrenheit here, something like that. It's really cold. But still, I will have a great night. And thank you so much for wishing the best. And with that, that is the end of tonight's stream. I got to thank every single one of y'all once again for watching. It has been an absolute pleasure getting to run this channel for all of y'all tonight. It's been an honor, and if you have enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because it makes me very happy, and it makes me enjoy seeing this channel running. And so, with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Long live the Lee Spring Army, and Slava Ukraini! The Lee Spring Army will never die.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.